Hi, guys.
Hello.
Welcome to Army Guest Night, which is something new that I came up with as an excuse to talk to people that are not just me on live streams. So today I would like to introduce to you my friend Maddie. And Maddie, introduce yourself, please.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm Maddie. It's nice. I know a lot of you, but it's nice to see you. And we're kind of gonna talk about music and the music industry. I have my master's degree in vocal performance and my bachelor's degree also in vocal performance because why not?
Because
and
why not?
Why not? That's the thing. And yeah, currently do a lot with music. I am a professional musician. We can talk kind of about what that means. But yeah, so that's me.
Yay. Give
Yay!
give me a second. I just realized that when I was moving around this chat box, I like skewed it. So
Oh,
you
you
got
did it.
it looks like a Star Wars. Like
It
the
looks
Star
like the
Wars
Star Wars
text.
crawl.
And
Hi, everybody.
that's a little obnoxious. So uh uh
I'll expect. I don't know. I don't know
ah
how to fix it.
yeah, hang on. Reset.
Hmm?
Uh oops. You need that. That's your clothes. Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
I'm
I
I'm
am
so good at
currently
this.
cat sitting, so this is not my house. And I also am not as experienced with cats as I am with dogs. I love Frida. She's adorable and she's so cute, but she may wander back and forth, or if you hear meowing or scratching, because she likes to scratch chairs, that would be Frida.
That
So,
that's okay. We all have pets, and
yes,
mine will come around to talk at some point, and
they'll yell at you.
probably yell at me about how I'm not petting them enough.
Yummy, I'm hungry.
Which to be fair is correct. I'm not petting them enough because yeah.
Yeah. Frida last night, so I've been sleeping here, and I woke up in the middle of the night and her face was in my face. And she was just staring at it. I was like, dude, what the
Oh, it's.
heck?
I mean, that must mean she really likes you.
I think she does. She's warmed up to me, but it was terrifying because I'm not used to that. So it was, I woke up and
Yeah,
was like, hello.
yeah, that would be a little bit too much for me.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so anyway, to let you guys know, so like the reason for our stream today is because I wanted to pick Maddie's brain and basically take advantage of all the knowledge that she has about the music world from her standpoint. And like Maddie, like you're more in the classical music world,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
because as a opera singer in training, like that's what you do, that's what you learn.
Hmm.
And so I want to dig into your background a bit, and just basically like understand your perspective. And then I have a bunch of questions that I want to chat with you about, and with the lovely armies in our chat,
Sweet.
and you know, just basically like chew out some topics together.
Hmm. Totally.
Okay,
It'll be fun.
so if you guys are ready, let's begin.
Woohoo.
So the first thing that I want to ask you, Maddie, is like the most basic question: how did you get into music?
Oh, Lord. So yeah, I'm gonna do that. A lot of my interjections are sung, and it's not, it's unintentional. Um, but my family is pretty musical. My dad does a lot of work as a musician. He's bounced around. My mom was a pianist growing up, and I'm the oldest. So I we actually have a video of me at 9 months matching pitch with what my dad was singing, which my parents now looking back are like, "Oh yeah, that was
How?
weird."
Wait, but how? Like he was singing something and you were singing along?
Like, or he would play something on his guitar. They've got a video of me, him sitting in front of me, and I would sing the note that he was singing. Not all the time, but like,
Wow.
enough that it was weird. It was like, why is this infant?
Can't relate, but okay, go on.
So I started singing. I know it sounds very cliche, but practically, but at the same time, I could talk. It was very much at the same time. And then I started piano. My parents taught me piano when I was 4. So I started classical piano. And then from the time I was about 3 or 4, I started talking about how I wanted to play the violin. And my parents were kind of going, where did you get that? First of all, because none of them play violin. My dad now plays, he played bass, but now he plays upright bass. But at the time, he didn't play upright bass. So it was very much like,
Wait,
where did the violin come from?
what's upright bass?
Upright is stand up bass, so string bass up, whereas electric bass is to the side.
So, bass.
What
I'm
Yugi,
gonna ask the
yes.
stupid question. So bass
Okay.
meaning like a cello, like a bigger than a cello.
Yes, different notes. It's what Yoongi played in the last Bangtan bomb. Where he actually was playing a bass, so it's
Ah,
much
okay.
bigger. A bass you have to play standing or sitting on a stool. It is the same as a bass, same fingering everything as a bass. It's the sideways. It just both have four strings. Guitars have six. I could go on about this, but
Gotcha,
it's
gotcha.
the foundation basically. But the
Okay.
point is that like he didn't come from like a classical world, so violin is classical. So they were still not entirely sure where I got
Cartoons?
violin from. Yeah,
Cartoons?
possibly could have been cartoons. Could have been we would go see Minnesota Orchestra. I'm from Minnesota, so I don't remember when we started doing that, but so then I went to private school for 3 years and then public school, thank God, for the rest of my life. But in the 3 years I was at private school,
Was it not a good experience going to
no,
private
it was
school?
great. It's just there's a lot more. It was a very small private school, and I got to do more with life and academia and things in a public school, which is kind of funny if you think about
Gotcha.
it. But yeah,
Gotcha.
but my private school started a string program and for people 7 and older, and lo and behold, I was 7, and so I started violin. And I've played that. I still actually actively play that. I added French horn when I was in 5th grade because why not?
How
I
does
liked
that
it.
relate to a violin?
Didn't. You chose an instrument in band in 5th grade, and I tried a bunch of them and liked the French horn a lot. It's a really, really fun. I can't watch this. Oh, it's okay. Don't worry. This person said they can't watch it right now, but
It's okay, Maddie.
you're
Just
fine.
focus on me.
Sorry. Yes, I get distracted. So anyway, French horn was just something I added, and I played that all throughout middle and high school. And I think not to like make myself sound really cool, but or really good, but it was pretty evident early on that I was musically inclined.
Well,
Like
clearly it brought you joy.
it did very much. And so I, even with violin, I actually talked to my first violin teacher within the last couple of years. And I didn't know this, but at the time, apparently she called my parents and said, I have my first prodigy because I could
Wow.
just do whatever she told me to do. And when people talk about like the squeaky violin, I just never had that. I never had the squeaky sounding plug your ears violin. That's not to say
Yeah.
that there wasn't it what didn't like I had to work at it, right? It wasn't like no, I picked this up and play it
Yeah. No,
perfectly.
I mean,
But
I can understand that because, like, when I was in 5th grade, we had the chance to join band and pick our instrument, and,
mhm.
like, the clarinet just made sense to me. I was like,
Yes.
I get it. There's a reed, you blow it, you make the notes. It
Mhm.
reminds me of a frickin' recorder. I get it. I can do this.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
but I think for you, it's just that with more instruments and just your voice, right?
Yeah, music just kind of so all of that to say is that I was juggling. I wasn't doing piano anymore, but I was juggling violin, French horn, where I was first chair French hornist through the entirety of like middle school and high school, and then voice at the same time because I started taking true voice lessons in 8th grade. One little thing there is that voice lessons, you really shouldn't take voice lessons until you're past the initial stages of puberty because
Why?
your voice is going through so much adjustment at that time that first of all there's not a lot you can do with a student before that without risking their voice because their voice is so fragile at that time. You can do some basic technique things, some basic music lessons, but as far as true voice lessons go, working on
Oh,
repertoire and
so
stuff,
like
yeah.
is that why like when kids sing it's like a really small high pitched like cute
Yes.
voice?
Exactly. And men, you can hear guys' voices go through the most dramatic change, but women's voices also change significantly. And so there's a lot of eh, actual physiological reasons behind it, but for a lot of voice teachers, myself included, I very much have this rule of, I really need the student to be 13 or above, or if it's a girl, have gone through their first cycle and everything like that, just because that will set some things and your voice is starting to become what it will be when you're an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I have a question
yeah,
then. So, what about those like talent shows like America's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, where they have
kill
those
me.
like little kids come on who like belt music? Is
Some of them are fine. um, the ones that we used to have discussions about this in school, and it's discussions that are still had with other teachers. It's a big problem. You have these kids come on, they're like, I'm gonna sing Puccini I'm gonna sing this aria from this opera. And they come in and they've got this like vibrato, like, it's like really obnoxious and really big.
sure, obnoxious. Yeah, okay, yeah.
For like a 10-year-old, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so they come in with that. And what they're doing is that their voice, I mean, maybe 1 in 1 billion, but that's not them. You can hear they're manufacturing their vibrato. They're moving their larynx, they're tightening different areas. And a lot of these kids go on and don't have a voice in 5 years. So
Why?
the
Like, what are they
because
like
they're
shredding their vocal cords?
yeah, so what they're doing is like eventually your vocal folds will build up calluses, right? So I actually had this problem. This was a big thing that happened to me when I was 16. So kind of move fast forwarding a little bit. So I got really burnt out on violin at the time when I was 16 and decided to really go for voice. And still play violin. Like I said, I still play, still gig, all that stuff, but stopped taking lessons, stopped thinking I would be a professional violinist. So I did that, and then I all of a sudden like had sang through laryngitis, which was stupid, and also didn't have the best technique at the time, and ended up developing pre-vocal nodes, vocal swellings we call them. So vocal nodules are calluses that build up on your vocal folds, and your vocal folds are supposed to come together like this, right? They're full closing. Now, what calluses will do is they'll prevent them from closing completely. Oh, there we go. Closing completely. So, you've got a lot of air moving through. So if somebody is unable, there's a difference between adding breathiness to your voice on purpose or having a sound, and people who are having vocal issues that they're unable to focus their sound ever. And to me, that's one of the indications, not just to me, just in general, when you go to vocal therapy, that you've got something going on with your voice, right? So
Sorry, I got distracted. Okay, hold on. Actually, Maddie, I'm sorry. I've like pulled you into 3 different directions because I was just I like to understand what you're saying and the things that you say.
Yes.
Like I have a basic understanding of music. I've played instruments.
You do.
I know
We wouldn't
basic
talk
music
about it.
music theory. I mean, that's why we have our conversations.
Yes, it's true.
But like there's a lot of things that I want to make sure I understand and that I'm not assuming.
Yeah.
And also asking you for me is much better than Googling because
Very true.
I never trust what's on Google, but yeah, can I actually just pause your very nice explanation and just go back to talking about your background?
Oh my gosh. Well, I kind of segued back into it.
Yeah.
So I went to vocal therapy, couldn't sing, couldn't actually really talk for like 3 months. It was really traumatic, really problematic. It's a big reason why, so I'm also a voice teacher now. It's a big reason I'm so focused on technique and so careful with my kids who come in, mostly with girls at this point. And just a side note there is that a part of it is that what we listen to on the radio is very much, there are so many effects put on the voice. It's also not, you would never anything, like even what I do, unless it's opera, but whenever I do contemporary music, it's not just one take, like even if you have good takes multiple times, you're going to take from multiple takes. My dad now works in producing, and so the amount of compressors and all these different filters and EQ you put on things.
That like makes the voice sound brighter and more fuller and more like just better than life.
Yes. And autotune. Autotune is not a bad thing. Autotune, in fact, if anything, our ears are so used to autotune now that if you don't hear it, it sounds off. Again, genre specific.
I did a whole video on that. So
yes, you did. It was excellent.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it is right. Singing is much more complex. You're exactly right. So the whole reason I say that is because I have these young girls come in and they're belting and they're 13 or 14. And belting is when you're bringing your chest voice up. So I'm just gonna scoot back so I'm not like super loud. Um, but like I can't even truly like do a belt anymore. It's more of a mix, meaning my head and chest voice are together. But like let it go, can't hold it back anymore. Right? So like
I hear it. It's like you're opening your throat.
yeah, a little bit, yeah. It's just there's no mix of the head voice down there, and it's a little bit complicated to explain. But the thing is that I'm almost 26, so my voice can take that pressure. Now I still don't do it all that often because for me it just doesn't sit right. It's just I find mixing and that my mix is almost just as strong as my belt is, but that's a whole other thing. So I have these little girls come in and they're trying to emulate like an Adele or a Demi Lovato or even an Ariana Grande. And first of all, those voices, they're sometimes decades older than those girls.
They're mature.
Second, those aren't their natural voices. That isn't them singing in the shower. This is them with so much compression and all these effects on. That's not a bad thing. That's nothing against them. That's just how it is. So if you're trying to create that sound, it's not going to happen unless you have somebody live mixing your vocals. It's just not going to work. And then third, my big thing is like everybody's voice is important and everybody's voice is unique. And so yes, you can do impressions of other people or your performance can be inspired or impacted by other musicians. But your voice is the only one in the world that sounds like yours. It is your body. It is where it is your vocal folds themselves. It is how your body looks. I'm what's called a coloratura soprano, which means I have the highest voice and the most agility. And part of that actually is impacted by my cheekbones. I have very high cheekbones.
Why?
It has to do with space, just a lot of coloraturas. It's actually really funny.
Space in your mouth?
Space in your mouth and where resonance is, right, in opera. So we're all about resonance. So where the cavities in your head, because your head does have cavities.
In my
yes,
cheeks.
you do. Like your sinuses and your soft palates and everything like that. It's all about that. So
you say this as if I knew this. This is new information to me.
There you go.
Slow down. I have spaces in my brain in my face that are not filled up.
Yes.
What?
Like think about how if you have a sinus infection or a cold or your sinuses are hurting, that your voice sounds more nasally and stuffed, right? Like it sounds, and so that is because the resonating space is inflamed or all of these different things. So in opera, we don't sing with microphones, right? It's all, I mean, they're not taped to us. Sometimes they'll have some on the floor if it's a really big orchestra. But for the most part, when I've done opera, I have never sung with a microphone. It's been completely, my body is acting as the amplifier.
Yeah.
So the whole point in that, going back to voice, is that your voice is specific to your body and your body shape and the way your voice is formed and all of these different things. And there's people, I had somebody who, if you have a cleft palate, there's nothing necessarily wrong with your voice, but it impacts how your voice comes out and the resonating space.
Interesting.
So I just touched my cheeks to check if I have a cavity in there, and I do. There you go. Exactly. So
the more you know.
The more you know. Your head isn't full of just skin, right? Like there's different areas.
I mean, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense, but also that's kind of weird.
Not it lie. Is. It is weird. I never understood how some people could sing super loud. Yeah, exactly. So really, it's less to do with how much power your voice has, because like I just demonstrated, belting is like pushing in your chest voice, and that to me and to a lot of people is more exhausting for your voice than like me singing. Oh, that's. That, right? So
I like how you just effortlessly pulled that out, let us look at it, and then put it away. Like, I'm sorry. Like, this is why I call you a music box. Like, literally, you're like, music off. And I'm just like, let me think in triplicate about what I'm gonna sing and what it's gonna sound like and make sure that I'm not gonna make a fool of myself. Okay, I'm ready. Oh, no one cares anymore. Okay, we moved on.
Part of that is practice, but my dog just looked up at me in my computer. I'm sorry that my dog and my cat, the cat I'm sitting, have been like, this cat has just looked at me like, what the heck, woman, have you been doing? Anyway,
Hold on.
so
Oh,
yeah.
can
What were
we
you
go
saying?
back? Can we go back to talking about your background? We've gotten
Yes.
to you like in high school and not even like to the current you, and that's like the stuff that I think is really cool and interesting, Maddie.
Yes.
We'll
So
come.
I
We'll,
kind of
we'll
got
come
there
back to
because
all these topics. I
yes.
promise you. I have
Okay.
a lot of questions for you.
So my whole point was, not only do I teach now, but had the vocal issues in high school. And so ended up getting those resolved, thankfully, especially when I went off to college. Um, I kept playing French horn, eventually had to drop it because I didn't have a French horn anymore. I'd love to play. If anybody's ever selling a French horn for super cheap, let me know. So then I went to college, and I was trying at the time because I was doing a lot of musical theater, because I don't strictly just sing opera. I sing really a variety of different genres. At the time, I was trying to figure out if I wanted musical theater or if I wanted opera. And I really decided, just based on my own temperament and based on my own kind of inclinations and where I felt and just how much I love music, that I wanted to focus more on the music aspect, which is vocal performance. Whereas like a musical theater degree, those are actually a little bit harder to find sometimes, because there's just such a combination of things. And I didn't have the dance portion.
Oh, so like if you were gonna do musical theater, you have to know how to dance. You have to
Yes.
be good at singing and dancing at the same time.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Stuff like that.
So, yeah, and there's also a level of, not all musical theater programs, but musical theater in general often, especially dance, has a shorter shelf life, right? Like if you think about it, like my friend right now who I've done a cover with, he's in Hamilton. He went to Juilliard, then he's
He's
in
in
Hamilton on Broadway.
Hamilton.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing.
he did the international tour of West Side Story. We were the two leads in high school together, did a bunch of stuff. So,
Is he the
but
one
he,
that you did
yeah.
your song with? Come
Yes,
What
come what
May?
may. Yes. Uh-huh.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's already got some physical, just from all the dance he's done. Physical, like he's had to have surgery, and he doesn't know, he's 20, he's 2 years older than me. So he's 28. And so he already doesn't know how much more, he can be fully dancing, like with, or if he'll have to go to teaching and stuff like that. That isn't always the case, but musical theater in general, because they're doing 8 shows a week often, they're, it's just a different style of singing. It's all these different things. It can have a shorter shelf life for an artist than opera, because opera, on the other hand, is a little bit different, and it sucks in some ways, because your voice doesn't stop maturing until you're in your 30s, early 30s for me. For men, it can be all the way up into your 40s. And so
Oh,
you've got these,
when you
yeah,
say maturing, do you mean it gets deeper over time?
not necessarily deeper, but more solid all the way across all of your registers. So right now, the thing I'm working most on is that like my super high top and my middle top and my low top to an extent is like super
My
fluid. I know it's a weird way of saying it, but it is able to be projected super far. All of these different things, like it's, and my low voice, which is not like low, but it's low for me, is less grounded, has less of like the operatic feel than my upper range. And that just is maturity. Coloraturas, the voice type that I am, that section of our voice comes in last. There's nothing you can do about it besides strengthen it, which is what I'm working at. But like all these auditions I did this year, the feedback was, your musicality is amazing, your intonation's amazing, we really liked you. Come back in a year or two when you've got more low voice.
That's so rough, because like what can you do?
Yeah, just keep working on it and keep strengthening that part and keep strengthening all the other parts too, so you don't let them go to the wayside. But that's what I mean about opera, is very much like a long career. Now, I mean, that there's a reason you see men even in their 60s still doing opera. Women, it's a little tricky, because once you go through menopause, your voice changes again. If you have kids, your voice
What?
changes. Yeah.
What?
Any hormone change. In Germany, they give women 2 days off a month for when you have your cycle because your voice changes. Not like
Wow.
horribly, and you can still sing around it, but like,
But I would imagine, well, for various reasons, it's probably harder to
yes.
sing, right?
Yes. Yes. It's,
Oh my
yes.
God.
Just picture your
Wait.
diaphragm.
Germany does this, but the
Yeah.
US doesn't? Of course not.
Oh,
Of
hell
course.
no.
Of
Why would the
course
US do
not.
it? No. No, you just grin and bear it and you deal with it. But like if I'm scheduling things, for example, like not to get too TMI everyone, but like I planned it so on my auditions, I was supposed to, have my period for a week and I was like, not going to have that cuz it's going to mess with me, so I just skipped that week on the birth control cuz
Oh my God.
like I didn't want to deal with the issues that were going to come, which I could work with, but I wanted to put
Yeah.
my best foot forward kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I get it. And that
Yeah.
applies to every female in
Yes,
it,
100%.
who's an artist who's singing. That's not fair.
No.
I
No.
don't like this.
It sucks. So back to the whole point of that was that I went into voice. I wasn't sure about opera, but I also was told when I was about 16, again, by a couple different old choir directors. They heard me sing and they were like, "Have you ever considered opera?" And I was like, "No." I don't know, like why. And their daughter is actually a professional opera singer, and they said you should consider opera.
Oh.
And then another teacher connected me with my teacher at Minnesota, and when I was 17, and I started taking lessons from her. So I went to Minnesota, got my master's degree in vocal performance, and graduated summa cum laude with honors, and I was really happy with it. Did a bunch of auditions for a bunch of different master's programs, got into several of them, decided to stay at Minnesota because they were giving me a full ride and
Nice.
money.
I mean, always follow the money.
Yeah, exactly. So money, and then I ended up having some health issues, so it ended up being really good that I was there. And then not only that, but COVID hit in March 2020, right when I was finishing the master's, which sucked. Didn't get a chance to do my master's recital, which is kind of what you work for the entirety of your 2 years of your master's.
It's probably like your equivalent of like a master thesis or something,
Yes,
right?
it literally is. That's what they compare it to. It is your master's thesis, and then you do your orals. So I did do my orals, but it kind of sucked. But it is what it is, and
Is
it
that
worked.
is that like the thing you do that like basically showcases your work and you hope like the way they show it in movies that like you hope someone comes and sees what you've done?
Not necessarily that aspect of it. I suppose it's possible depending on who you invite. It's a little bit of a victory lap. It's so you get your degree. It's showing your mastery over. So we have to be able to sing and mostly singing and good. I took French, German, Italian, right? So those are the three big ones in English. So you have to be able. So it's like I did 2 undergraduate recitals too, junior and a senior recital, and it's a good 35 to 45 minutes of singing. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but when you think about like that's you by yourself singing the entire time. That's not like,
That
like
sounds
BTS
like a
is,
lot.
it is. And BTS is amazing because they do these crazy 3 hour concerts, but there's still 7 of them. So it's not one of them singing the entire time.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting, not to like compare anything, it's just different, right? You use different skill sets and stuff like
Is
that.
it like your portfolio?
Yes.
Yeah. Don't worry
Yeah.
about the comments. I will feed them to you.
Thank you.
Because I think for you it's harder to see them because it's all small
It is.
text.
I'm like,
yeah.
what does it say?
Don't worry. I will feed them to you. I got
Good.
you.
Thanks.
Um,
Yeah, it is. So like I took for my master's, so all of anytime you audition for any sort of higher level education, so whether undergrad, I did an undergrad tour, master's, and then also if I go on and get my DMA, which would be my doctorate, or all of these auditions I've been doing, there's often a first round video, right? And so it helps if you do your master's or your junior or senior recital to be able to clip from that because it should be some of your best singing. And you've got the live audience and all that. So to be able to clip from that and then send it. So in a lot of ways it is like a portfolio.
okay. Gotcha. So, and where did you go to school?
Minnesota, University of Minnesota.
Okay. And is that where you are now?
Yes, similar,
Well, in
like in the
Minnesota.
area. Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Not physically at the university anymore, but yeah.
So right now, what are you doing? You have a master's program this summer, right?
I do. I don't it no, technically it's on their website, so it's public. I'm gonna just
Oh,
count that as
oops.
public. No, you're fine. I wasn't sure if I should name drop it, but
Oh,
so all
okay.
of these auditions I did this last year. So like to give you the perspective, I submitted like 40 applications and I got 10 callbacks, which is actually
That's a
for
lot.
I'll be honest, that's actually really, really good odds, and I wasn't
That's
expecting that, so yay. But
Yay! That's amazing. That's a 25% response
yeah,
rate. That's really
yes,
good.
exactly. So and considering my voice type, sopranos are the most common. There are I once did an audition where I kid you not, um, I think there were 130 people that were called back, and 100 or like 95 of them were sopranos, and the
Wow.
remaining
That
were
is a lot of
divided.
that is a lot of competition.
Yes,
Is
and
it
there's different,
is
yeah.
it because women just naturally tend to be sopranos? Because I'm a
Um,
soprano too.
Yeah, it's kind of both. It's that mezzo. So we don't use the term alto in classical music. That's a choir term. It's okay if people
Hmm.
use it, but we use the term mezzo soprano and then contralto. Those are the three female voice types. And then there, like I talked about, I'm a coloratura soprano. There are subtypes in each one, right? So like a dramatic soprano is what you think about when you think about like the fat lady singing over like a 300 piece orchestra.
Hmm.
And that also is where body type comes in because not always, but generally, if you lined up a room of people, you might be able to tell what kind of voice type they were just based on their stature and stuff like that.
So, Montserrat Caballé,
Mm-hmm.
what is she?
She, I would have to see because she's got such great agility. She's definitely either a lyric or a dramatic. She's not a coloratura. She's got agility, but she doesn't quite have the same sound up that I do at the top. So yeah, and again, it's not that you can't sing or like you can't split. Like I'll do some crossover work into lyric soprano and stuff like that. It's more so again you're protecting your voice, right? So like I'm never, barring the weirdest hormonal change in the history of hormonal changes, I'm never gonna sing dramatic soprano repertoire. I'm just not because my voice,
That's
if I
low.
did,
That's a low.
nah, it's a little bit lower. It's still soprano, but that's the like huge sound where it's these long lines over a 300 piece orchestra, and it's like this wall of sound that's coming at you.
Gotcha, gotcha.
For me, my voice, not only could I not really do it justice, but my voice probably wouldn't last a year. Like it would
So your
kill it.
biology is really important in this. Like you
Yes.
get what you get.
Yes. And there are ways to strengthen certain areas and your voice can take different paths, right? And people who they thought were there was somebody who thought they were like a dramatic soprano and then they realized, "Oh wait, I'm actually a coloratura." Like okay, that's cool. But that's why you go to school. So that's the other kind of difference too is that like classical singing, I don't know of anybody in the current atmosphere in where we are now that is doing classical singing that does not have a degree. And if they don't have a degree, they had really like a lot of private voice lessons, which
Hmm.
are the equivalent basically
Yeah.
of
Basically,
of
you
that
have to
degree.
learn how to use your voice in a way that's
Yes,
sustainable and brings out the best sound. It's not something you can
exactly.
just intuitively know.
No. And you need the feedback from others. That's when people are like, they don't need feedback. I'm like,
For
just
for
doing
for
it.
our lovely audience, whenever people on Twitter complain about BTS getting any kind of feedback for their singing or performing, and in those Bangtan bombs, and everyone freaks out on Twitter like, how dare anyone say anything negative about them? Maddie here is just like, but they need to know. You're never gonna know
Yeah.
otherwise.
And there's like, obviously, don't be an asshole about things, right? Like, I've definitely worked with people, and that's the problem sometimes with the industry is that there's people who are just dicks, right? So, yes, I'm not talking about that kind of feedback, but like, feedback, you can't always have, you're the best thing that's ever happened to music. You're not. Like, it's just, you have to get better. And so, what you do, and this is one of my favorite quotes, is like, take criticism from those you would go to for advice. And so, I'm not gonna take, I might now, if like, as far as vocally, other areas of life, but like in music, if some random person on the internet is like, that sucked, It's like,
Okay.
who are you?
Okay,
I don't
bro.
know you.
Whatever
I
you
wouldn't go to
say.
you. Yeah, I wouldn't go to you for advice. I wouldn't go to you to ask about what repertoire should I do in the future. You don't know any of my story. You don't know any of my history of music. You don't know my voice, any of these things.
And how would
So
you know
no.
what the technique is? Or
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, the more I talk to you, the more I come to understand that, like, especially the kind of singing you do, like, it's an art form and it's a science, and it
Yes.
takes a long time to train your voice to do
Hmm.
the best that it can and for you to
Yes.
mentally recall what you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
And honestly, it feels like a type of sport.
It is. They've done like how many calories you burn in this kind of singing, and it's intense and performing and adrenaline. And I mean, I was in a show once where I was doing a sit up on a high note. It was just like, cause why not? The director was like, do it, and I was like, great.
Oh my
um,
God.
but it happens. So just about that feedback thing is, it's like, yes, like just like anything, there's extremes, right? And you don't want to have people who are just criticizing to criticize. But if they're genuinely trying to help you or bring you a new perspective, like that's the other thing too. The other thing is, like, people will say, well, what's your opinion on this celebrity's voice? And I'm like, I'm not their voice teacher. I'm not their coach. There are things that maybe I can say generally, like, okay, I hear this in their voice, but I'm not going to go make a judgment on their voice because I have no relationship with them. I don't know how they're practicing. I don't know what they sound like without all of this production value on their voices. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what it sounds like without reverb. I don't have a relationship with them where I can say that.
Yeah, you
So,
don't know what their biology is or
exactly.
what things they're struggling with. So then when
Yeah.
you see like people on YouTube react, like voice coach reacts to BTS, is it a bunch of bullshit?
Some of it is not. There's one guy, don't remember his name, his Tristan, I think. He has some good insight sometimes. And it's the ones who are not trying to say this is bad, but more saying this is what I'm hearing them do, and this is what I'm hearing them what they're doing, and this is my assumption of what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basic, because there you can make some judgment calls. But yeah, but the thing is that there are some where they're like, well, this is not the way you do it. Or when people try to evaluate based on like Western music, classical music, right? When somebody's like, well, what voice type is this person? It's not a bad question. It's just, I always respond with, I can't make a strict judgment because I haven't heard what they can do. They're not
Yeah.
singing classically. They're not singing with a lot of vibrato. They're singing with a microphone. They're singing with amplification. So there's also singing with maybe a different type of genre or style. And there's ways your technique changes subtly, not a lot. Your
Mm-hmm.
technique stays
Mm-hmm.
the same for most part, but there are things that change when I'm singing jazz versus opera. So when people say, well, what voice type are they? It's like,
Okay, I have a
based on
question
what?
question
Mm-hmm.
for you then. So
Mm-hmm.
if you spent all this time to become classically trained so that you
Mm-hmm.
know how to use your voice in a sustainable way,
Mm-hmm.
that's not usually what happens with like people who go like the pop music route, right? Like they're
No.
not typically that.
Lady Gaga, if I'm remembering correctly, she actually went to Juilliard for a little bit. It's really funny because you hear a lot of classical musicians cite her as one of the best voices in pop music.
Oh, I mean,
It's
I
fascinating.
would say
Hmm.
that, like, especially when she went on, like, was it the Oscars and she sang live? I think that was like the first time that she had sung not live in a way that wasn't like her normal like music. That's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
not showcasing her classical training, I guess.
Yeah. I would say I almost 100% of musicians in the industry have vocal coaches, if not voice teachers,
Okay.
because you cannot be touring without somebody there. It's just like if you were an athlete and you had no trainers or doctors on site, it wouldn't happen. You
Mm-hmm.
have to have that, and you have to have like people helping you to maintain your voice. And so, because it's your whole career, and if you get sick, it changes things.
So
All different
it
things.
isn't like a question of like, oh, I finished. I
Yes.
have learned singing. I never need a coach ever again. It's
Yes.
you need a coach. Like you have a vocal lessons.
I do. I have a voice teacher. I guess the big thing is, so voice teachers are going to focus more on technique overall. Coaches are going to focus more on the interpretation. There's some crossover, but vocal coaches generally don't dive too much into technique. They're
Mm-hmm.
more about like the language or how you're coloring language. So like I have a coach who like, when I sing in French versus German, the languages are very different, and so they color the sound differently, and what words you bring out, that kind of stuff, or acting, or even coaches like, I would bring this out here, and or this dynamic here, and that kind of stuff. Pop music, I'm not 100% sure what you would classify some of the people on tour. I would say a lot of them are kind of doing dual duty, where it's voice coaches and voice teachers, or kind of a combination of both.
Yeah, because like I asked that for like BTS, for example.
Mhm.
I would assume they have some form of
They do.
vocal coach.
Yeah, I know JK said in that one interview that he doesn't take voice lessons. And I think, again, I don't know, but I would assume with that is that like it's he's not taking lessons from like a voice teacher, but they have people from like coaching him on different things, right? Like they have people
Coaching in
coaching them
what
on
sense?
performance. It would be
Like
tough to know.
helping them to like bring out
Yeah.
the lyrics better when they sing. Like
Could be that, could be language, could be just vocal maintenance. So whether that's warm-ups, it doesn't have to be a weekly thing either. Like that was what I was gonna say, is that like eventually, hopefully you get to a point where maybe you're not having to have weekly voice lessons. Some people do, but a lot of people don't. But then you work occasionally with a coach, right? So like right now, I'm not working with a voice teacher every week. I'm working with one maybe every other week or every 3 weeks kind of thing, because I don't need that consistent, like, because my technique is pretty solid, right?
yeah.
And so I think that is what, and based, depending on the voice teacher, and I can't really speak necessarily to that. I was trained very much in the Western classical genre. So it's like I can't necessarily speak to what he was experiencing, but based on what he said in that interview, I would say that there were people who were trying to have him change parts of his voice or change parts of his technique, probably coming from a very good place, but that just didn't vibe with him, and that's totally fine. And it is what it is.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not going to make a judgment on that because I don't know the intricacies, and it could be that like they weren't, it just, sometimes you don't vibe with a teacher, and that's totally fine. That's why I didn't go to. Yeah.
It sounds like it's very personal. Like like for someone who's a singer, I would assume your voice is part of your ego.
Yes.
And as you like to tell me, it's part of your body. So
Yeah.
And you're putting it out for criticism and judgment when
Yes.
when you're trying to audition for stuff. And for BTS, their voice is definitely always on in the spotlight. So I would imagine it's, you want a coach who you feel, or a teacher or
Yes.
whatever, who's not judgmental and who works with you instead of telling you, oh, this is wrong, fix it.
Yes. Exactly. 100%. I saw a couple comments.
Yeah. So first question, can you be taught wrong and then correct it? And
Yes.
does that do anything to your vocals?
So I'm a living example of that, I would say. I don't necessarily want to blame the second teacher I ever had, because she wasn't wrong. She just didn't address certain things in my technique. And so then I was building off of that and then had the voice issues, and obviously corrected them, and it's fine. It depends on how early you catch it.
Yeah. Is it usually something that you can correct by just not speaking for 3 months, or do you need surgery?
Depends. Julie Andrews is the most famous example. Hers is the most famous example of a surgery gone wrong, right? She developed vocal nodes, they botched the surgery, and she can't sing. That is like the nightmare example. Rarely happens anymore. Part of it was that the surgery was in its very early stages, all those things. But that's a little bit of the horror story people talk about. But Sam Smith is another example. He developed vocal nodes, and he had to take a pause in his career. I'm not 100% sure if he got vocal node surgery or not, or if he just went on vocal rest. But it's a really big thing between vocal therapy. You have to go to vocal therapy and learn, kind of relearn your voice and ways to fix it.
I was
And that
wondering.
can, yeah.
Sorry, I was just wondering why we hadn't heard from Sam Smith. Ooh.
That was the big thing. I think Adele at one point was having some issues. And if you listen to some of her early stuff, it was a similar thing. She was young and she has a phenomenal voice, and I adore her. But like, she was very much pushing. And so part of it is you get on these tours or you get on when you're doing a lot of singing and it's not sustainable. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's part of the issue. Now, there are 1 in a million people where they sing how they want to and their voices just can take it. And we kind of call them the
Great genes.
unicorns.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
genes you guys have.
it is. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. But part of my issue then is that when my students try to emulate them, it's like, well, you're not them. And
Yeah.
I'm going to make a pretty safe bet that your voice is not going to be like theirs, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So then when BTS go on tour and
Hmm.
they have those moments where like they get sick or their voice
Hmm.
just gives out and they're really depressed about it and they can't sing anymore, is that because like they just overdid it or were singing in an unsustainable way? Is it a combination of that and them catching some kind of cold or
Yes,
something?
100%. It's such a combination. Like, there is, if in a perfect world, perfect technique, perfect environment, perfect atmosphere, no like exact right humidity, you should be able to sing for hours and not have any issues. But we don't live in a perfect world.
How do you control the humidity?
Exactly. So there's obviously things you can control, which is like how you're singing and the warm-ups you're doing. And the big thing actually is singing isn't as hard on your voice if you're doing it correctly as talking is. So a lot
Oh.
of in like a show week for me is
I
limiting my talking.
I'm never talking ever again at work. I'm just gonna sing all of my information at people. Like,
There
can
we
you
go.
pass me the printer or something?
But they talk about a lot of vocal therapists see teachers and see people who are, if it doesn't have to be vocal therapy isn't always with singing. There's a lot of times where like teachers are yelling in a classroom all day and talking and
Mm-hmm.
they're not talking from their diaphragm. We don't think about our technique when we're talking. I think about
Mm-hmm.
my vocal technique when I'm singing. Well, not so much
Mm-hmm.
anymore because it's habit. But I don't think about it with talking. And yet that's the part that's the most tiring. So I would say with BTS then it's like illness, absolutely. You do what you can to avoid it, but it happens.
Yeah.
Flying, that dries you out. So,
Yeah, I
all
can
of that,
imagine.
100%. Altitude is different. Altitude can
Yeah.
mess with your voice. Jet lag messes with your voice. I mean, it's your body, right? And then, yes, there are
That's so
times where
not
if you,
fair. How are
no,
you
it's not.
supposed to go on tour then if literally everything can fuck you up? Is
You
that
control everything you can.
is that why
So,
people prefer to do like road trips and buses? Because then you avoid planes?
totally could be. I'm not sure. Part of that could be a money thing. I'm not
Oh,
100% sure.
yeah.
But like, I don't know. It's hard to tell. It totally could be. I mean, but then you'd say if people get car sick, well, that's not good for your voice either. So
Yeah, if you throw up.
yeah, that's not
Um,
good.
yeah, another
Hmm.
question for you that someone had was for BTS, do you think that they would have had voice lessons during their training years
Yes, 100%.
because they're and then the question is like the assumption is that their voices have matured since their
100%.
debut?
You hear Jay listen to all of them, but like Jungkook when he was 14 compared to now, vastly different. And that's just because of the work he's done, not to diminish that at all. Like it's definitely that, but also because he's gotten older and his voice has matured. So yes, I would bet money that they had vocal training. Like
Yeah, I mean,
I
I would
would bet my life
assume as
savings.
a trainee, right? Like you,
Yes.
yeah. I guess just my only question it was like, well, do they still do that now?
And that's where I would think it would be individual and it would be this is where like I don't speak Korean, so I don't know the exact word choices he used. And that's why it's like, it I don't think there's a way, especially when they're doing new music, that they're having nobody listening and giving feedback for
Yeah.
vocals.
Yeah, because I would think it's easier if you have a vocal coach
Yeah.
or whatever come and say, here's the way I think would be easier for you to sing it and would
Yes.
make the lyrics sound better.
Well, and we saw that in that clip of P Dog, I think it was, who sang "Sing from Your Gut," right? "Sing from Your
Mm.
Stomach," which was the first viral tweet I ever had because people were like,
Yeah.
"That's so rude," and I'm like, "No, that's literally what you do. Like, that's what we
Oh,
do is
I remember
as
that.
singers."
Yeah.
So that is both technique and coaching, right? And so they even if they're not going to designated people, they've got people in their circle, and that's what you need. Is you need to have an inner circle of people that you trust to give you feedback and trust to help you make decisions so that when you get feedback from other places, you sort through, do I want to accept this or do I not want to? It's so important. And that's why I'm really glad it's at all appearances seems like they really have that, and people
Mm-hmm.
who care about them care about their voices, even if you want to take the most cynical approach possible. Wouldn't make any sense for their company to want to damage their voices because that's how they make money.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's their only reasoning, but like when people are like they're intentionally trying to sabotage, why? Why would they do that when that's how they make money and your voice is money? It wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, no. I agree with you completely. So how have we got then to the present then? Do you have
Yeah.
any plans for after your master program?
I thought you were going to say my master plan. I was like,
Yeah, what is your master plan, Maddie?
So currently, I never told you the name of the summer program. So I'm
You
going
got
to do this summer program.
distracted.
Summer program called Chautauqua. It's in New York. I think there's like 40 of us that were invited. I'm super excited. It's more training program, but basically everything I'm auditioning for now are either for training programs, and they're not like school. It's again like this intensive, like you're getting feedback from a lot of different sources. You're doing performances. You're performing every day, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that or young artists in residency programs. Those are all the other auditions I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So young artists in residency programs are like apprenticeships with opera houses. And so it's almost like a residency like doctors do, except for obviously without the medical stuff. But you're for basically a year, you spend time and you shadow and you do outreach. So a lot of like you do a lot of performing for children and for lots of things. You'll cover roles, kind of like an understudy.
Oh, children's like theater.
Super fun. I got to do that.
That's really cute.
I got to be Cinderella, which is
Oh.
my favorite princess. And I got to see that in 2020, before COVID shut everything down here.
Uh-huh.
I did a whole school tour, and it was the most fun I've ever. I just loved it. And
Are kids better audiences than adults?
They're more real. When I sing a super high note, some of them are like, oh, and some of them are like that, even though it's not. It's just they're more. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing. They're just very real. I remember the Star Tribune, which is the newspaper in Minneapolis, wrote actually about our performance, and they pointed that out. Like they were like, it's just kind of fun to see these kids get exposed to it. And I'm not expecting everybody has to love it, right? But my philosophy is like, even if I don't love a genre or love a song, I try to find something I like in it or something I can appreciate or admire, because there's somebody out there who likes it. And I don't want to just dismiss them. And so that's kind of like, if we can educate people like about all different types of music, but if we can get kids exposed to things, because freaking elitism in opera is stupid.
We'll get there. I have questions for you.
But like when we can get people exposed to it early and show that this is really for everybody, then even if they don't love it, maybe people can at least see like, hey, there's cool stuff that goes into this. Or maybe this will make them think of other music differently.
Maybe you've inspired future opera singers now.
Maybe I have. Who knows?
So on that note, first off, what instruments do you play now? Because there's like a whole bunch.
Yes. I still play piano. I actually took up keys then, same time I took up voice. So that's just reading chords, not necessarily classical piano. But so violin, viola, piano, voice, obviously. I would still say French horn. I took guitar for a semester because I wanted to. And then like the
so that
third
you could
week,
play Wonderwall?
yes. It was hilarious too because I was the only music student, like music major in the class, and so I actually knew the guy teaching it after a little bit because he was a TA and he had to like go to a concert, so he had me teach the class one time, and I was like, I don't play guitar. I don't do this, but I still taught it. It was fine. So percussion, yeah, just different, kind of stuff. I can do some ukulele. Kind of depends.
When I was in Hawaii, I took ukulele lessons, and they specifically said
right.
It's ukulele, not ukulele.
Right.
Ukulele means bouncing breasts.
Yeah.
So ukulele.
Ukulele. Sorry.
That means bouncing bean or bouncing tick. Fleet.
Okay.
Bouncing fleet. That's what it means.
That's cool.
Because of like the way you play it.
Oh yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, and if you say ukulele, it means bouncing breasts.
Oh gosh, I have to remember that.
Literally, our like instructor was like, if you take nothing else away from your vacation, please remember this.
Promise me.
We're tired of people calling it bouncing breasts.
Oh no.
I was like, duly noted. I will spread this message to the world.
I forgot about that. You're right. Okay, ukulele. I can do a little bit
Yeah.
of mandolin, which is just violin on its side.
Huh?
Mandolin is the same fingerings as a violin, it's just on its side, and it has frets.
Wait,
It's
so
a
if a violin would be like on your
like
hand.
guitar. No, like guitar.
Oh.
Sorry. I guess I'd be still
Oh,
thinking
would
like,
that would
yeah,
that be like what the dude from Road to El Dorado plays?
probably, yeah. It's got two strings, so like there's 8 strings on it, but there's only 4 different strings, if that makes sense.
So you
So
have
there's
two of the
two of
same
each
string?
strings. So it can make for that kind of sound
Oh,
with a
cool.
pick. So I'm not like really good at it, but yeah.
Oh. So what's your favorite instrument to play then?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, violin I'll always have like a super soft spot for because it's, and I think not being under the pressure, like, okay, this is kind of my favorite story a little bit, but like, I did one of the last things I did on violin as like a classical violinist was I did a competition,
Mm-hmm.
and the feedback I got was like, she just seems really burnt out, which lo and behold, I was. um, Imagine. So, and I loved orchestra too. Like I loved that, but it just wasn't, I was so tired. And so I didn't obviously do well in the competition. And then 6 years later, I won the whole competition on voice. And it was such a,
Nice.
like a moment where I was like, okay, this is what I was supposed to be doing, you
Yeah,
know?
you made the right move.
Yeah.
You
So with
followed your
violin,
heart, but more so you followed your voice.
yes, brilliant, lovely. But with violin, without that pressure, it's become much more expressive of myself and very much just very natural where it just pours out. And so um, I think that to some extent, obviously voice because I studied it and that's what I do and I love singing. But I think sometimes it's hard when it's your job to like
Mm.
always love it, you know? Whereas I think right now with violin, because it's not like I make money doing it, but because it's not like my job, it is always fun, if that makes sense.
Do you want to tell everyone what your multiple jobs are right now?
Yes. So I teach voice and violin. And I also lead worship at a church and do different things with that. Do a lot of different gigging with weddings and funerals, and I'm in a part of a jazz group. And then I also teach ESL to students in China, but there was a whole thing with
On the
that where,
DL.
yeah, on the DL is true.
Yeah.
I was teaching with like a legit company, and I still am, but China outlawed all foreign tutoring. So now I'm teaching on the global platform, and I'm just not asking questions when students from China sign up. It's what's happening with that. Yeah,
Awkward.
yeah, yeah. And then doing auditions on top of that. So kind of a whole variety of things. And I know we kind of we could talk about this a little bit, but like, you know, when people talk about being a musician, I think there has to be a difference between like, do you want to be a celebrity? Because that's more than likely not going to happen. Or do you want to make a living in music? Because there are plenty of people who can make a living in music, myself included, and most of my colleagues, but we're not like massive celebrities. Would it be cool? Sure. Am I against it? No. But like, that's not my ultimate goal, is to not be, it's not to be a super famous musician. It's to make a living doing music.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. Like, why did you decide to make music your career, and like, what did you think expect your career path to be? Right, because like I say that from the perspective of
Yeah.
someone like I went to college, I studied accounting and
Yeah.
finance. I knew that I would end up in corporate America, that like I would have an office job, I would have
Mm.
probably set hours,
Yeah.
I'd have a week, and the weekend would be mine most likely, unless you're an auditor, in which case your life belongs to your audit firm, which is why I'm no longer an auditor.
I was gonna say it's no longer on
Yeah, yeah, but so like that was my idea of like what the profession that I
Mm-hmm.
chose looked like, and that I would be making a decent living doing that. What was that like for you? Like,
Yeah, COVID threw that a lot. Um, I think that was partially also why I wanted to do vocal performance a little bit, because it was a little bit of a clearer path. So undergrad, masters, young artist and residency programs. At some point, I would love to be a professor. I'd love that. So at some point, I want to go back and get my DMA. But kind of the counsel with that was like, if you go boom, 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 it looks like, well, you couldn't get any work in the field, and so you just went and got your degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but at the same time, it's possible, but most people don't just come out of undergrad and go into opera, they do the master's. So there is a barrier to entry for a lot of this, which is part of the problem, I think, and there's a whole
Barrier to
lot.
entry in what sense? I would assume one way is financially.
Yes, absolutely financially. And so, like, I'm grateful because my family and my grandparents have been super supportive, not only like just emotionally, but financially as well. But
Don't
I
read. I
also,
will read it to you
okay,
later.
okay. I also, at the same time, have made like a lot of choices with my finances, right? Because I knew I wasn't going to go be a doctor or a lawyer where I would make a whole bunch of money. And so, like, I stayed at Minnesota, for example, when I got into USC, where I got into Peabody, like all of these different things, where Michigan, where I could have been $78,000 in debt. I didn't want to.
$78,000 in debt on top of trying to find one of those
Yes.
coveted
Yes.
opera singer positions.
100%.
Fuck.
Yeah. So I guess to that, I would say, like, the path has always been a little bit like, well, undergrad, master's, young artist in residency program, hopefully. I think, again, COVID really threw that because now you had all of these people that, have left the game, but you've also had a whole year. Now you've got like basically 2 years of people who haven't done young artist programs. So it's not like we all got a shot at it.
Yeah, so your competition doubled.
Yeah. Yeah, it did.
Jesus.
And now, like I said, a lot of people got out of the game. I know I have like most of the people I went to school with aren't doing opera anymore. And it's just because they couldn't.
They just couldn't sustain themselves financially, or
yeah, a lot of them were married, got married, and had kids, which is amazing, good for them. I'm not, and so I don't have to. I only have to support myself financially. And for a lot of
that's
these people,
so hard. So you can't really get married and have kids if you want to be an opera singer.
I mean, you can. It's just your spouse has to be super understanding, right?
Well, if you're female and you're pregnant and you have hormones, you're gonna ruin your career chances. Fuck me. Like that's so not fair.
100. Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, and that's the other thing too with like some of the counsel I got in my master's from 2 different professors was like, do not marry another singer, which I thought was really fun. I mean, if it's love, it's love, but like, do not marry another singer because more than likely there are cases where the man will choose to stay home with the kids. But most often, it's the woman who gives up the dream and it's the guy, partially because there are fewer men in the field. And so he has a better chance of making the money. Yeah. So, and that's not like, that's kind of a cynical way of looking at things. And there are examples of it working out and it's great, no problem. But there are plenty of examples of it not working out. So,
so your friends or the people you know who gave up on being opera singers, what careers are they doing instead?
A lot of different things. One of them went into video game development. One went out back for her master's in therapy, which I've been toying with the idea of doing possibly.
Like musical therapy?
No, just like straight up therapy, counseling. So it'd be a completely different degree. Music therapy is a different degree, and it's a great field, but this would be like therapy. But a lot, you've got people who are working in like sales, or I think somebody went to law school because, you can, like, it's not.
Does that help you learn law? You can sing opera in the courtroom.
Exactly.
Can you imagine breaking out in song in front of a judge? Like, my client pleads guilty or not guilty, and the judge is like, okay. Like, moving on.
Yeah, okay. Part of it's like a liberal arts degree is pretty well-rounded, right? So you learn a lot of different things. So I think, I'm not saying it's common to go to law school from a vocal performance degree, but it's still a liberal art degree. Yeah.
Doesn't really sound that common to me.
It's happened though.
Okay, so question for you. From the chat. Jay says, JK started out so young. I often wonder how Bang Shiuk saw the potential in him. How can you know that someone so young can grow to have a great voice since the person is still growing?
I think there's some general things, general musicality, right? I also am of the belief that you can really teach anybody That being said, I don't think anybody can go be a big star necessarily. I think there has to be some raw talent. Um, Generally, maybe I'm sure there are some examples, maybe not plenty. There are a few examples of people who had I just can't think of many people who were completely tone deaf that ended up becoming big stars. I just don't see that. So
William Hung.
there you go. There are a few, right? And part of that, like as a teacher myself, part of that is
Hold on,
like,
you guys know who William Hung is, right? He's that guy who went on, I think it was Britain's Got Talent, or was it America's
okay,
Got Talent? Which one was it? I
I
don't
don't know.
remember. But he's the one who went on there and started singing like she bang, da 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 da,
Okay.
she move. But he sang it atrociously, and it was something with Simon Cowell. So
Mm-hmm.
it was either Britain's Got Talent or
It's one of
whatever
the two.
he does in the in
America's Got
America.
Talent. Yeah.
But he's not on it. He's a judge for something, but I forget what it is. But
I don't
anyway,
remember.
so Simon was so like offended by him, and it was so funny that William Hung became like a meme, and he released like an album.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It has to do with it's listening,
Maybe
right?
it was American
Like,
Idol.
oh, it
That's
could have
maybe
been
what it
American
was.
Idol.
Okay.
Yeah, has to do with like a lot of times with tone deaf people, it's learning how to listen. So you're actually giving them like listening lessons in some ways on how to like match pitch and stuff like that. But my overall point is that like as far as seeing potential, you can see potential in young people. You may
Mm.
not you've everybody even when you're young has a general like tone in their voice. It'll change, but it's not like it's I just think the like people who are trained in music are able to distinguish talent and
Mm-hmm.
distinguish people and then add with that his work ethic. I think that's probably a big part, right? It wasn't that you had this genius prodigy that was lazy. It was that you had this really gifted young man with a
Who was
great
willing to
voice.
work for it and willing
Exactly.
to put in the practice and the training that you wanted him
And
to.
could, from what you see from the behind the scenes stuff, could do like what was asked of him pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't necessarily like that isn't like a I mean it's a pro, it's not necessarily a con if you can't do it, right? It's
I
just
think
like
it's definitely pro. It makes
yeah.
the group like the process of making music that much
Yes. Yeah.
easier if you can be someone like the producer be like try
Mhm.
it this way, and he's like
Mhm.
okay, and then he does it.
And as much as like Jin, he was recruited off a bus and all this stuff, he still had some like they wouldn't have necessarily had him be part of BTS if he had no ability to sing, right? Like
Yeah.
that wouldn't be so there was still something they saw in him that was
Mm-hmm.
like trainable and even if it wasn't at like the polished level he is now, it's
Mm-hmm.
still again it's what you're seeing in people um at their young age, whatever age they are, and the potential. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's the best way of
Mm-hmm.
putting it. Is their potential? What do you see as their potential? It doesn't always work out, but it often does, especially if you know what to look for.
And basically what you're gonna look for is just a strong voice or a special musicality, an ability to
Mm-hmm.
like play with notes or be on
Mm-hmm.
pitch or
Mm-hmm.
to capture your attention,
At the
right?
very least, to be on pitch and to be able to take direction and work with it, and the drive. Some of my favorite students, like maybe aren't the most gifted, but work their butts off, and they've improved so much. Now I'm working with a level that like someday I'd like to work with a level that's like gonna be professional musicians. Right now I'm working
Mm-hmm.
with students who I don't really necessarily foresee them wanting or choosing to go in that direction. But like at least like right now, there's a level of drive that they have to
Mm-hmm.
get better. And so I think if you're looking for people who you want to become professional, amazing musicians, there's probably a little bit of a higher bar than just I love to sing. That's important, but there's probably it's a higher bar of like, can you match pitch? Do you have any sense of musicality?
Mm-hmm.
What is that like? Can you take direction?
Yeah.
Do you work well with others? That's a
Yeah.
huge one. Is because people don't really realize that like a lot of your work you get can be based off of your interactions with others when you're not singing. And that's a huge thing. So
And that's
all of
because
those
making
things.
music is such a collaborative process.
Yes, 100%. Even if it's all scripted, it's still so collaborative. And you have to be able to work together and work with people
Mm-hmm.
and be kind. So, yeah.
So on that note, question, and this was also asked in the chat, is it
Mhm.
wrong for someone to take vocal lessons just for fun?
No. I would say like
Well,
depend on the teacher.
you're paying someone.
I was gonna say, um, it depends on how you approach it, right? If you went to like one of the top teachers in the country and were like, I want to take voice lessons, but I'm an engineer. I mean, they might be like, their right is to say, no, I'm not going to teach you because I'd rather teach people who want to do this. But there are plenty of teachers who would be happy to teach anybody and
Well,
and
like
who
what if
their
you're
heart
like,
is for.
I want to improve my singing, but
Yeah,
I don't want to
exactly.
go professionally.
Yes, 100%, 100%. That they're like that's I even do that now. Again, maybe not necessarily the level I want to teach forever, but there are plenty of teachers who do that, especially if you're not if you have to be paying them, right? Like that's how we
Yeah.
make our money. So if you're just gonna go like, I want you to teach me, but I'm not gonna pay you, no.
No.
But
But
yes,
I
so
would
much.
figure if it's, if everyone who's in music is trying to find ways to make money, if I'd be
Yes,
like, I will pay you to be
exactly,
patient with me and help me improve my voice, like
a
it's a
hundred percent.
win-win, right?
Exactly. And if you have a goal, like, I want to get better at harmony, I want to get better at my technique, I want to be able to sing this song, that's always helpful too. Just a side note, people have asked me, like, how do I find a voice teacher? One of the ways I would do it is to
Yelp.
contact your local, don't go yell, contact your
Oh,
local, like,
oh,
high
really?
school.
Oh, high school.
You just don't
Okay.
know anybody, you don't know the credentials, right? It's
Reviews.
possible.
They'd have reviews on Yelp, right?
Yes, but if you contact your local high school and go to like if they've got a choir department, like if they don't have a choir department, yeah, Yelp, fine. But like if they have a choir department, they know the choir directors are going to know of music teachers in the area. That's just kind of how it works because they're trying,
Oh, the
some of their
network.
students. Yes, exactly. So I've encouraged adults in the past to like check with your local, or there's often music schools in the area, or like, where I took violin lessons. It was a school for me. It wasn't like school during the day, but I would go take lessons.
Mhm.
And so if you check with fellow musicians, they're going to be able to network with you and find somebody for you. Um, so that would be my advice too. Is I just know people have talked about that. Like, where do you even start? It's like, well, the internet can be your friend. You also don't know anything about these people.
Really glad you said that because I was
Hmm.
kind of serious when I said Yelp.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not like I don't think it's this is like bad, but I just don't know. Like, I wouldn't necessarily trust. I
No,
would trust
you're right.
somebody's opinion.
I would trust a music teacher a lot more than random reviews on Yelp.
Yes, and that's not to say that they're all bad, and that would be, totally fine. Or go to your local university. The other big thing too is a lot of the doctoral and master's students, they are wanting to teach, right? And they're
Mm.
wanting, and they often take on students. Like a lot of my doctoral friends at the time were teaching all of the students who were non-music majors. So that's another good place to check is like check with the university if they've got a voice program and see what do they
Ah,
suggest. What are the music
gotcha.
teachers? Do they know people? Sometimes people retire. Some people are looking for more, spots to fill in their voice school. They might say, sure, So
Mm.
that's another one to look.
Okay. Ivana has a question about
Hmm.
harmonizing.
Okay.
She says, I assume it's a she. I think, but I may be wrong, that BTS goes in this direction more often now than in the past. How does that work? Do you train them or do they come naturally?
Harmonizing? Um,
You're right.
Both.
I think I do. I agree. I hear more harmonizing.
Hmm. One thing I'll just say this is a very petty pet peeve. So, singing in octaves is technically not harmonizing, right? So when they're singing, one of them is singing the same note as the other, and they're just an octave apart.
How
Technically, that's not
often
harmonizing.
how often do they do that?
Quite a bit.
Oh.
The entirety of like Fix You that they did, that was pretty much all in octaves. Harmony is when you're adding notes other than the ones that are already being sung, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is getting a little music theory, but the point is, it's totally fine if you say it, it's fine. But like, I can always tell who's maybe had more music lessons based on how they're talking about
So
harmony.
the song that I can think of where they have really
Mhm.
good harmony is their live performance of Truth Untold,
Yes, yep, absolutely. There's harmony.
especially towards the end.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yes.
Jimin harmonizes, JK
Hmm.
harmonizes.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
So for harmony, is it something? It's both. Again, not to like, but like that is, I would say, of all of like my areas of like natural ability, harmony is probably my greatest. Like I started singing harmony when I was 4, just
Hmm.
could do it. It is always like, it is almost like a grid system in my head. I'm the person people go to whenever they need a harmony. I can just do it. So for me, it's a little hard to
It's
explain.
well, it's
Yeah.
also I think so it's a little mathematical, right?
Yes, 100%.
So
So
let
yeah.
me try and give a
Okay.
what do you call it? Like a casual person's explanation of it
Yes.
because I
Layman's. Yeah.
yeah, layman's casual person,
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, music theory, like think of a piano. You have a very long piano, right? All of these white keys, and you have a bunch of black keys.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, each time you go up a white key, it's a step, and right.
Yes.
And if you go up from a white key to the adjacent black key, it's a half step.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes.
So
There is a time when their two white keys are next to each other, and those are also a half step if there's no black key between them. But
yes. But I'm ignoring that because I can only do that so much.
Yep.
So I already lost my train of thought. What was I trying to explain?
You were talking here. I'll pull up a piano. You were talking about harmony.
Yeah. So
There you are.
the reason what were we talking about before? There was a reason I started trying to explain this.
You were talking about harmony and intervals. Were you going to talk about that?
I don't know.
And harmony and octaves?
Why?
Well, I mean, I can
Shit.
jump in here and give my...
Jump in.
No?
Help me. Hold on, the 1 second. I'm trying to find like a black little square that I can hide over these comments because they're very distracting. Especially for dear Maddie. Maddie keeps trying to look at them and I keep hiding them from her.
I'm trying not to look at them.
I know. I've pulled over. The thing is like I pull over a white folder or whatever to hide the comments, and then they reflect on my glasses, and then I can't stop looking at my glasses with the white in them.
Oh no!
So, please, guys, feel free to keep asking all your comments.
Don't apologize for asking. I love hearing them.
Yeah.
It's my problem.
Harmony being mathematical. Thank you. You guys are so smart. But hold on, I need to find a black box or a black picture. So that I'm gonna Google this. Black
house is hot.
Square. Oh, you said you were hot. Like I'm literally getting hot now in my house, and we're
sorry. We don't even live near each other.
No,
There's literally a snowstorm outside right now.
Yeah, your snowstorm is coming to me tomorrow night.
Sorry, our bad.
Why are you apologizing? It wasn't your snowstorm.
It's Minnesota. It's such a Minnesotan thing. We apologize for everything. Like, our bad. Sorry. Harmony being mathematical, yes.
You guys are so smart. Show me folder.
I can also explain it in terms of like...
No, the reason... Yeah, the reason I brought it up was because... Thank you. It was about the fact that it's mathematical. Because, like, you can just think of it as, like, okay, well, what's the next... Mm-hmm. Like two steps up, 3 steps up. What's so like
exactly.
So because you have an octave is 8 notes, and after that it repeats just higher. So that's what Billy was saying when she's like, oh, when people sing one song and an octave up, it's literally the same note. Can you please give us an example?
So that's the same note, just an octave apart.
Just between octaves. So you're saying that's not a harmony. That's just nice sounding music.
That's just a pet peeve of mine, but it's actually not even that bad. It's just more like I wanted to share that. So now you're armed with knowledge that if they're singing the same note, it's an octave. So there you go. Just wanted to. But harmony, to answer your question about like, it can be taught 100%. That's how I teach my students. It also is something that develops over time. As you work with harmony more, as you sing with more people, as you sing in choir is a really big one, you learn how to hear it and learn how to hear it differently. So yes, I would say like even just starting out, it could even be that like some people, even when they hear harmony, they're not the best at staying on their note, right? It takes practice to like be able to hold your own on your part and not drift to the other parts. So could be that.
I remember when I was in choir, I would do that with other people. I'd be like, fuck, what is my note? And I would literally do the thing where you hold your ears forward so you can hear yourself sing more. And I'd be like, shut up, I can't sing, I can't hear myself.
Yes, 100%. So
question, so what we're talking about, harmonies, is that the same as key change?
No. Key change is when you're in one key, so we have different, in Western music, we have different keys, right? So C major, for example, I'm just gonna pull out my piano again. You can see the teacher coming out at me. So the C major scale is all of the white keys, right? So I don't know how we got that high, but that. So that's C major. That means that there's no sharps, no flats in the key signature, right? That's what you see at the beginning of the music. So, a key change is when we move from that key, so those notes, to a different key. So an example would be like in Dynamite, when it all of a sudden gets higher, right? Like in after the bridge or the down part when Jimin and JK are singing, and then all of a sudden we go to a different key.
In the
That's a
music
key
video
change.
when the fireworks come out.
Exactly. That's a key change. So the harmonies change just because the key center, as we call it, what you're building do, if you're using do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, what do is changes, right? And so then your harmonies are naturally going to change because do is different. That is with movable do, but I'm not even going to go into that.
I think the easiest way to explain this for me, it was just like with a piano, like showing the keys. And like there's videos on YouTube that explain.
Yeah.
But in layman's terms, a key switch is like you're literally switching keys. Never mind, I don't know how to explain it.
But yeah, so if you also think of numbers, so if a number system, if we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then all of a sudden you're 2, 1, 2, now 2 becomes 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now 2 is 1. Does that make sense? So that's when we're talking about key change. We're literally making
you're just shifting. You're shifting up the piano.
Yep. So that's what that means, if that helps.
Yeah. So, all of that being said, that there's a lot of music theory behind BTS.
Yes.
Do you think BTS are trained in music theory?
That is a very good question, and I honestly don't know.
Because I started thinking that they might be when we saw them playing around on the piano and in the soup.
Yes. The other thing that would be interesting to see is, like, again, I'm in a completely Western music theory, right? And Western music theory, while there are some similarities across the board, not always, I would be interested to see what their music theory background is. I think there's absolutely some theory back there. Like, I think they can read music, for example, or like at least have a knowledge of understanding of music, especially if you're composing.
Yoongi, yes.
Yes.
Yoongi plays the piano.
100%. I bet Namjoon, I would again bet money Namjoon does as well, just because that's kind of, his brain would be amenable to that. I would think there would be a basic understanding, a passable understanding, if not even better than passable.
I would guess that
for the rest of them.
Tay has been trying to learn.
Oh yeah, if he's saxophone, violin, trumpet, he has to be able to read music. So yes, there would be there. I think all of JK, Hobi, Jin, Jimin, I think all of them have at least an understanding of
yeah, I definitely think they have an understanding, especially because at this point in their career, like, their music is made with music theory, so you have to have an understanding of it. And
it doesn't necessarily mean that you can sitting down and reading a piece of music. That's called sight reading, right? Which is another one of the areas that that is one of my better areas in life.
You're so talented. I'm very bad at sight reading music, and you're just like, oh, it's like this. And I'm like,
It's a little bit more math, and part of that's just how my brain works. It just works. So that is a little different. I would say that, like, if you put a sheet of music in front of them, they could probably say, okay, like, if you pointed to a note, what note is that? They could probably figure it out, right? So that's what I mean, is like there's probably some understanding, and even if it's like a language that's slightly different than like what I use, there's probably some understanding of things. Or even if it's subconscious, if they're singing harmony, there has to be some subliminal understanding of some parts of theory, right?
Honestly, from like what we saw in the soup, to me it seems like they learned music a little bit the same way I did, where you're like, I don't want to sight read. I want to memorize. I want to look at the keys and see it and think of it that way. I don't want to look at the notes on a
learning by rote.
What do you call the lines?
Staff.
Yeah, on a staff.
Yeah.
Okay, so then last background question, and then we'll move on to the actual industry questions.
Okay.
Which we've kind of sprinkled in here, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
How did you get into BTS, and who's your bias?
Oh, that's I can talk about that for a while. My best friend Kasha, she had been trying to get me to listen to them, and like when you're going to school for music, I'll be perfectly honest. There are some people that like just love to be immersed in music all day long, and then there are some who like like
Who
Yoongi in his
don't?
yeah. Well, and like Yoongi where he was like, I don't listen to music all the that's exactly how I am. Because it's like it's my life and I love it and I also don't want to hate it. um and so and
But
it's
you
also
listen to all the things I link you, all the links
of
I
course I
send
do
you.
because I trust your judgment and I always enjoy it and it's different. And I'm not in music school anymore where I'm analyzing music all day long, right?
Fair, fair.
Like and that's part of it is when you're immersed in this and sometimes it's you have to listen to other music cuz something's looping in your head and all that stuff. But anyway, it's just there are times where like if I wanted to give the proper weight cuz I knew BTS was important to her, I just wasn't at a time where I was like I could give them the proper weight that I felt like they deserved because I wanted to be present with
Mm-hmm.
her. So I think she showed me like Dope in like November of 2017, and I liked it, but I didn't really do. And then we got to like March 2018, and we finally I think it was during spring break, and we finally like sat down and we're listening, and she would and I was like freaking loved Fake Love and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I was like, holy shit, what is this? And just like loved how the
And that
music
had to be
videos and
later because Fake Love didn't come out until
was
like
it
May of
maybe it was May then.
2018.
It might have been May 2018. She may have shown me right then.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember. It was an M month. It's probably
Sorry,
May then.
that's just like the one I know specifically.
No, you're good. So May 2018.
I'm
You're
fact
right. That's
checking
probably May
you.
20.
Sorry.
No, that would actually make more sense because then we would have been done with school, and that would make sense why I then had yeah. So that's probably what it wasn't spring break. It was May. So yeah. But anyway, she showed them to me, and like I that night stayed up till like 3 a.m. reading fan theories about the HYYH universe because I was like super invested. And the rest is history. I think I'm OT7 100% all the way. Love all of them. I think musically I just relate to Jungkook and
Okay, I'm not gonna do
Yoongi.
any gang signs.
Yeah.
I was trying to do
What?
I was trying to do a 7,
Like,
but they all looked really lame. Like I was like trying to like 7.
nice. Beautiful.
Sorry, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Saying Jungkook and Yoongi, I think are the ones like I love again, love all of their styles, love everything. I just think my biases are maybe like those two. Just again,
The
musically,
musical
there's some.
ones, JK and Yoongi.
Well, they're all musical. They're all amazing, and they're all like.
Wait,
but
yeah,
like,
that's done. Wait, they're all musical. They're in a music group. What the fuck am I talking
no,
about?
I didn't. But like, there's like a tone that JK has in his voice that I really vibe with. Like again, love all of them. Love all their vocal colors is amazing. I think JK's in mine maybe in some ways the way he approaches singing is maybe similar to the way I do, which is why I kind of connect with that. And the way Yoongi listens and hears and produces music again is a little bit more similar to how I do. But then the way June sees the world, I'm like, okay, well I vibe with that too. And then the Jin's just love for life and hilarity. I'm like, well I vibe with that. And like there's all of it. But I would say kind of bias Yoongi and JK, but OT7.
Yeah, I mean that's all of our eternal problems, right? And then you can flicker between biases over time, like, well, maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe I just love all of them, and I don't like picking favorites. But maybe I do have a preference, but maybe I don't. But maybe I do.
Yes, exactly.
You just go in a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you for giving us your background. Now that we know, an hour and a half later.
Yes.
Well, that's fine. So, and then I met I met you
Yes.
around Dynamite.
Yeah.
So August 2020.
Was it August? Yeah, you're right. It was August 2020.
And it was because you sang something.
It was. Danny put out a Be Our Guest. Oh, it was because B was coming up. That's right. They had announced.
Yeah.
And one of our moods on Twitter put up like she wrote Be Our Guest. She rewrote lyrics to it. And I was like, I'll sing that. Which I do on occasion. If you look at my Twitter, it's filled with that.
Which is what you're known for.
Yes. And so, yeah. So I did that. And then Yami was like, hey. And then we had a whole combo. And we became really close. And we've been really good friends.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so Miss Bung Luna, I think you're asking for an intermission, which I need as well because I have to pee.
I also should also pee.
Yeah, so we'll take a 5-10 minute break and we'll come right back, guys. And then we'll get into the more contentious stuff
Yes.
about in this discussion. So,
Contentious. It's fine.
so yeah, be right back, guys. Go get hydrated.
Bye. Yes.
Oh,
Well,
you guys didn't get to hear me making fun of things. So I shall repeat. I hope you all had a really fun pee break, because I did.
and I said, I don't know if I would characterize it as fun, but I would say it was necessary. And then she started talking about
I was
how
just
she had
saying
fun.
it was very fun, it was very productive, and it resulted in me getting myself more tea. So I consider that a win. So, you guys can hear us all now, right? We're good to go. I didn't fuck anything up more than before.
I don't know.
I think so. There's
It
always,
looks right.
looks good. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm putting my square up.
So I don't see it.
Yeah, so you don't see the comments.
Mhm.
Okay, so now there's a bunch of things that I want to ask you based
Okay.
on your perspective as someone who is in music, is trying to get into, is trying to make a living off of it, make that
Mhm.
your profession, who comes from a musical family. So you are basically the opposite of me. I like I play instruments and I sing in choirs and all that, but I'm not
Mhm.
in a music profession. And like for me, a lot of this is like a black box
Yeah.
of like sometimes people get discovered and they go into music and it's
Mhm.
magical, or sometimes people study and they go into theater or opera
Mhm.
and it's magical. And I'm like, I think there's a lot of steps missing from between A and Z. So
Usually.
I wanna ask your perspective on a bunch of things.
Sure.
So the first thing I want to ask is, do you think it's easy to get into music, like first like as a career, and then as just like for fun?
Mm.
Like so let's start. Like, do you think it's easy to get into music as a career?
Um, so this kind of goes a little bit back to what I was saying about like what's your reason for doing music, and like do you want to be famous or do you want to make a living doing it? Um, because it's not easy. It's hard and stringing jobs together, and it's not always glamorous. And
Is
all of
that what
that
it
stuff.
looks like for most people? Like you're doing
Yes.
multiple jobs?
Mm-hmm. Or even if it's like all most of my jobs are music related, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's still, yeah, I think for a lot of people it's multiple jobs. I think it's even if you do make it big, there's just so few people where that happens. It's who you know a lot of times, how people get discovered. Yes, I think part of the problem is that like the music industry likes to hold up these examples of people that were discovered and made it big. But for every one of them, there's probably 1,000, if not 10,000 people with varying levels of skill, but could even be that skill set that didn't make it big. So I don't know if that kind of helps, but like, and it's never. I think the later you start music, the harder it is. I don't think it's impossible. Like if you look at the arts, Morgan Freeman didn't start acting until he was in his 50s, and he's one of the biggest names in the planet. But
I didn't know that. Really?
yeah, yeah,
Really?
he did not do
Interesting.
anything. Yep.
What was he doing before then?
I honestly don't know, but it's one of like those stories where it's like you can point to things where people didn't start doing music until later in life, and that's totally fine. One of my friends became an opera singer, and he was in Harvard Law, and then heard opera and was like, "Nope, I want to do that." Um, so like, it's possible.
So this
Yeah,
switch between opera and
I know,
law
I know.
this is a really weird. It feels like it's
Isn't it weird?
using both sides of your brain, or like one or
It's
the
really weird.
other.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so it's an interesting, I think, but you have to acknowledge that just like anything in life, the later you get into it, the harder it can be, right? Because you have all of these younger people who have been, or people your age who have been doing it for decades
Mm,
that have more experience. So
yeah.
I guess it's kind of a mixed bag. I think what bothers me is when people are like, music's easy. It's like, well, there's aspects of it that are easy. And like I said, I think anybody can sing. I think everybody's voice is important. But I don't think everybody in the world should or could be a professional musician,
I don't
if that
think
makes
everyone
sense.
in the world should sing.
Well, not necessarily
Keep
sing,
your
but should or
mouth
could be
closed.
professional. Yes, shush. So does that like, or when people,
So basically what you're
yeah,
saying is if you're going to get into music as a career, you have to be prepared for working multiple jobs and
yeah,
competing with tons of people at every age
yeah,
and having to hone your
yeah,
skill. And if you start older, you miss out on all that time to become
yes.
better
Yes,
than other people.
100%. And it's not saying it's impossible. And if you're like really driven to do that, that's awesome. Like I personally support you 100% of the way. But you just know, I think you have to be realistic, right? And there are times too, like one of my colleagues we talked early on about like the inner circle of people that you kind of trust to help you sort through feedback and stuff. And he was the one who switched from Harvard Law to opera. And he was talking about how at least in where I am right now in my career, it's a little bit like banging your head against a brick wall. And eventually something's going to give. Is it going to be you or is it going to be the brick wall? And he said, it's partially setting yourself up for success. So for me, like saving my money in certain ways. And I'm living at home, so I'm saving money that way. So I
Mm-hmm.
have money to go do these auditions. My work, I've specifically chosen work and been able to do work where I can, if I get a call, I could fly to New York tomorrow if I needed to. That kind of stuff. So there's all of that. And so then you get to a level where some people maybe just lucked out in those departments but weren't as good musically, but they then are able to make a living in music because they did all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's all of that to consider. And then there's also who you know, and music and art is so much networking.
Why?
And
Why is it like that?
because you're more likely, I think as humans, we're more likely to help people we know than some average Joe who's sending, who you hear. It happens, like if you hear somebody on the street. But like even you think about America's Got Talent, for example, the amount of contracts, I don't know if you've seen the contracts they have you sign,
For
but like
America's
they
Got
also,
Talent?
oh my gosh, it's like scary. I would highly, if anybody ever approaches you, hint, hint, I've been approached by America's Got Talent and didn't do it. But if anybody ever approaches you with that, be very, very
Wait, wait,
careful
wait,
and
wait,
read
wait.
through.
You just slipped that in really quickly. Do you want to say that again slower?
Um, I was hoping you wouldn't pause on it. um, the my family has a band, and we got approached by America's Got Talent to see if we wanted to audition for it, and it didn't really work. My younger sister is a full time. She works in PR, and my parents really couldn't do it at the time either. But then looking further into it, the contracts and stuff, where if you like, they have you signed before you're not even guaranteed a spot. It's all spectacle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's what they want, and they want to be able to manage everything. So my point is, even those shows where they're like discovering someone,
It's fake.
it's fake. It
Fake
is.
ass shit.
And they want something with a good story. They want something surprising. They don't necessarily want the most talented people, because also talent is somewhat arbitrary too. It's subjective. But like the point about the contracts is that they basically want to own anything you will make in the future for like decades. It's very predatory. So my point with that is just if anybody ever comes to you, read the contract very, very, very carefully.
Find
So
yourself
you're
a
not,
lawyer.
yeah, yeah. Or somebody who is an opera singer now but went to Harvard Law.
I mean, sounds like your uncle should also maybe do a side gig as a music lawyer.
Oh, he's just my friend, but yes,
Your friend.
yeah, yeah. Not
Yeah.
my.
How did I confuse that with uncle?
No, I was talking about my family's musical, not my uncle though.
I swear you said uncle before. I'm losing my mind.
Solid.
Anyway, okay, so, well, how hard would you say it is to get into music as like a hobby, like to pick up an instrument, like just becoming a musician on your own?
I would say especially in this age where things on the internet, you've got YouTube videos, it's not hard at all. It depends on the level of proficient and good you want to get to.
What's the easiest instrument to learn in your opinion, and what's the hardest? You can focus it to the ones that you play.
From purely a technical standpoint, easy to learn, not to get an expert at. Let me just, because I don't want to offend my fellow colleagues.
No, we'll see. We'll see if my instrument is
Yeah.
the same as yours.
Piano is the easiest for people to learn.
Yep.
And it's the basis for most people. If you're going to start a kid on an instrument, start him on piano because it gives you a good foundation.
And
There's
it's
no sort of,
visually you
yes,
can see what you're playing,
100%.
what the note is, because you're
Yeah.
gonna pick different ones on the piano to play.
Yeah. Piano, I would also say guitar because there's so many resources out there for guitar and
Mm.
chords. Now, the thing with all of these though is that like I always encourage people if they want to start an instrument, like people are like, I want to start violin. Go to at least one lesson with a teacher so you can learn how to hold the instrument. Again, this is all about prolonging your body and not having issues. So like there is a technique.
Ergonomics.
Yes, there is a technique to piano, there is a technique to guitar. So it helps to have somebody on the other side who plays that instrument show you, oh, hey, you're bending your fingers weird. Like that's going to cause issues, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But it's pretty easy to get into music, just depends on how good you want to get. Because at some point, the self teaching is only going to take you so far, and you have to have somebody on the outside helping.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then to follow that up,
Mm-hmm.
um, how do you think one gets into the music industry, the music world? Because you just said it's about who you know. So you come from a musical family, so
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have like some inner knowledge
Yeah.
from your parents,
Yeah.
relatives, whatever. What about if you don't have any of that?
It's hard. Find people who do know because they're going to help you. Find mentors, reach out to people. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. But the other thing is, we're living in an age with social media and YouTube where you can get your music directly to an audience. I'm not saying you're going to, again, it's all about like, how do you want to make it big? And, there's a risk with YouTube. It's you put all this time and money into it because you want to have good recording equipment and stuff. But you don't get paid until you've got 10,000 subscribers, I think it is.
3,000,
Is
I
it
think, for
3,000? Okay.
monetization.
Oh, it is 3,000? I don't know. They changed something, so I don't remember.
It's 10,000, I think, if you want to sell merch, like the YouTube
Oh,
merch
is that
thing.
it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was also, I don't know how many hours. Is it 1,000 hours or something you need?
Some,
Or
some,
view time?
maybe.
My
Yeah,
point
yeah,
is,
yeah.
yeah. So there's that route of just putting things out there, of gigging, of again being willing to learn and get feedback from people you trust or people you think could give you good feedback. Um, there's the school route, which is kind of what I did, where you make connections very naturally that way, and you keep getting an education. But again, like if you're wanting to go be a pop musician, you can go to school and maybe go for producing or something like that. Or there
Mm.
are non-classical voice programs.
Yeah,
There's not
yeah.
as many of
I
those,
think
but
my university had like a sound engineering program.
yes, those are super cool. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
the person I knew in it was like one of the coolest
yeah.
people, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, you picked the right one. You picked the right
Yes.
subject to study.
They're awesome people. But yeah, I think just going out and doing music, which again is a little difficult right now, like you can't go gig in coffee shops really right now because COVID. But I don't know if that all helps, but I think it's possible. I think creating communities, reaching out to people, finding like-minded people, like the Musicians Army account.
Yeah.
We've got
So what you're saying then, just
yes.
like my observation is that you need to know people. And if you don't know people, you need to create a situation in which you can meet people.
Yes. Yeah, because even if you think about my auditions are all in front of people, and those people are the ones that are going to give me a job. So, and even with them, like they remember me from previous years. They'll keep a file on you. Like, again, speaking from a classical standpoint, that's what it looks like.
Mm.
But it really is about who you know because somebody may go, hey, I have a relative who, you know, does music. My favorite example, Nick Jonas was discovered in a hair salon because he was singing as a child in a hair salon while I think his mother
Really?
was getting a haircut.
That's so
And
cute.
it was adorable. And somebody there was a Broadway, so he ended up on Broadway when he was like 8 or 9.
Mm.
But somebody there happened to know or was a Broadway agent and was like, this kid's amazing. And so so there's coincidences like that. They could totally happen and it's amazing. But there's also, I think for generally people, it's just chugging away and trying to make connections.
So then, um, I guess, so that's if you're trying to just get in from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
What if you're like I feel like in some way that applies even to like someone like BTS, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like they are an established group from a different country and
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to break into this country. They need to make
Yeah.
like their company needs to make connections with people
Yes. 100%.
in the West.
Yep.
And it's difficult because when you have those connections, those one doors open up and you can be
Mm-hmm.
spotlighted, you can perform places, you get featured in
Yeah.
media, blah blah blah. And if you're met with hostility, then those doors kind of close to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And what sucks about the parts of the music industry is like I would say on the whole the artists in the music industry, like especially like you look at Broadway, you look at a lot of celebrity, the musicians are very forward thinking, are very progressive. We obviously have our own blind spots. We live in a systemically racist system, especially in the US. But I think that a lot of the people are very much like trying to bring more diversity, trying to have more people come to the table. It's in the administration that there's less diversity. It's the same reason you look at like the Oscars and movie making and how part of the problem is like yes, there's still times where you don't have as much diversity on camera, but you also don't have as much diversity off camera making the decisions. And it's
Mm-hmm.
changing, and I think there is change in that. But I think with like BTS, especially since they're coming from a non-Western like country music
And
industry,
in
all of
not
those
non
things.
English.
Yes, 100%. There's unfortunately some systemically racist things and just some ignorance, I think, in general. And you look at when they talk about the dark side of K-pop, it's like, well, the training that they go through, why is that dark when it's a lot of what I did? Or when you look at ballerinas. And so there's a lot of, like, I would argue that their system of training is very similar now to what I did in college and my master's degree and they did when they were younger, but it's not like it's a factory. It's training. That's what you
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, especially hearing about all the stuff that you've done,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like they combined like a
Yes.
dancing training and a vocal training. So
A
it's
100%.
and learning how to do both at the same time,
Yes, and
which is really
PR
hard.
and speaking and all of these different things. Yeah, sports, exactly. Like there's sorry, I looked at it. I didn't mean to.
I'm covering the comments from you, and you still seek them out.
I just they're over on the side for me. It's hard for me not
I
to see
know.
them. But yes, like all of those things, training isn't inherently bad. In fact, I would argue that training is
I think everyone
necessary
trains,
and better.
and
Yes.
even if you are a self-made talented artist, you're training
Yes.
quietly in your private time.
Hmm. And like I said, well, I don't know if I was talking a little bit about this before, where artists who go on tour have coaches. So you'll notice a lot, like some of these shows where they're like, "We found the next great artist." All of those artists, they immediately put in voice lessons and voice coaching. I cannot think of a single example where they don't do that
Mm-hmm.
because you have to have some training and have somebody telling you, just like because it's your body, it's your voice, you have to take care of it,
And
and
if you
that isn't
overuse it, you're
natural.
fucked.
Exactly. That's what it feels like, right? So that's why so back to the music industry, I think that there's this fundamental misunderstanding that I think is changing, thankfully, but not fast enough, in my opinion. And then there's also a lack of diversity at the top across the board, right? Where it's like, for example, in opera, because again, that's my area, it's mostly male conductors, white male conductors.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is. And that is changing in my generation and I'm 1996, so I straddle two generations. But um, it's still a problem because you can have more diversity on stage, which is great, and you need that not just for optics, but because people deserve that, and you need uh, you need different opinions, you need different viewpoints because things get stale.
I mean,
And yet,
there's a
yeah,
reason like that. I feel that so many people like you either like classical music or there's people who are like,
yes,
I hate this. I'm turned off by it. It's really like stuffy
yes,
and
exactly.
we've talked about this before where it's like you have as you've said, you have a part of the community that wants to just hold the status quo
Mm-hmm.
and hold firm
Yes,
of like
100%.
classical music especially should be preserved with the beauty it is, and that
Mm-hmm.
modernizing it would be poisoning it and tainting it and making it less special, even though that would make it more accessible and relatable to
Yes.
us, the common people.
And to give a little bit of just background in general, I mean, there's been a huge push in classical music. I would say musical theater and theater is more on the cutting edge of like being progressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've always been. And so I actually often get along, I don't want to say better, but like those are the people that I kind of vibe with. And that's not, but there is becoming more and more of that in opera. But just to show you how far we've come, my former now, she was my teacher I had for the longest period of time. She actually was just diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So it's hard for me to say former, but she's no longer my teacher. So
She will always be your teacher in heart.
there we go. Wendy. She when she was growing up and in opera, casting couches were a thing. Meaning you were expected to sleep with the director or the conductor or whomever to get roles. That was just what it was. So she was born in the 50s. So
80s?
60s and 70s, that would have been. So let's say 45 years ago, that was still happening, right? Like,
Disgusting.
yeah. So now, not to say that there's not still stuff going on, but that's not blatant, right? In opera.
It's not accepted anymore.
Yes, it's very much. And you have kind of what I think would be an amazing job, intimacy coordinators, which is they literally come in and sit on every rehearsal and they because you think about, you have fight coordinators, right, in movies and in opera, and people who choreograph fights. This person's whole job is to choreograph intimate scenes, whatever that looks like, whether it's an orgy on stage or whether it's just kissing. And the whole point is that it is an outside force who you can go to if you're ever uncomfortable, and they can call out, hey, you did that differently tonight. We can't do that. And so you're not, because sometimes you feel trapped, like, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm never going to get a job again. And the whole point of having an intimacy coordinator is so that doesn't happen. So that's changing.
How do you become that? Where do they come from? Are they?
So the woman that came to school to do this whole thing, education with us, was trigger warning, sexually assaulted, and just lots of stuff happened. And so her whole goal in life was to create this company where she could do this. And it's now become like they're the most sought after company, and opera programs bring them in all over. And it was really cool. But it came out of something really horrible. But so she was just amazing. So I guess we kind of got off track, but the point is that like there's still, like any industry, there's messy shit and there's dark sides of it that people are trying to change. And yet I think what I've seen with BTS, they're not necessarily with opera, but I see parallels with their area of the music industry, where it's like they're exposing things just by being them, which sucks because I don't want that for them. And that sucks when you're on the front cutting edge of something. And yet I think moving forward, they're shaking up the whole system, and it's never going to be the same.
When you say exposing things, do you mean like the way we help expose like Billboard?
Yes,
Grammys,
100%.
Spotify.
Billboard, the Grammys. Some of those things were already on their way to being exposed, I think, and radio. Oh God, radio.
Radio, Spotify.
All of that. But
and even toxic masculinity.
Yes. I think BTS is speeding that up. I would say even the idea of foreign languages other than English being more accessible to people. Again,
foreign languages other than English. Foreign languages other than Spanish, I think you meant?
Yes, but I meant but
foreign languages. I got
foreign
you.
languages, yeah.
I'm just making
so
funny.
Like how often, unless I listen to a Spanish channel on the radio, how often besides Despacito do they play a Spanish song? Or Latin American, not much, or Spanish, Latino, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I think all of that, BTS, with how popular they are and how good they are and how just straight up good of people they seem to be, that they're exposing things, thankfully, that should have been exposed a long time ago, but that may not have been exposed for a long time.
Yeah.
Or in the next 20 years.
And I think it's because there's so much attention on them that we bring as a fandom. Like
Yes,
when you have
exactly.
tens of millions of fans going, excuse me, what the fuck?
Yes.
It's really hard to ignore it.
Really hard to ignore it, exactly. And it won't, I am 100% confident. Granted, in my music history classes, we didn't get too much into popular music, but you can take some specific classes. I am 100% confident that if I become a professor, that we will touch on BTS, even if it isn't a deep dive into their music, but it'll be like,
Maddie, do you know yourself? It will be a deep dive.
well, yes.
Let's be
but
honest.
Like, let's be real. But like, even if it's just the colleagues I'm working with, because I don't know if I would ever teach music history, but like, I'm confident that they will be, even if it's just a line, it's still a big deal because there's a whole lot of artists that won't be in there. Mm. So I think that they are impacting the industry, but they're also exposing a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is both. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because
yes,
you're creating progress, but you have to bear the brunt
exactly
of all the
100%.
punishment, the punishment of progress.
And I wish they didn't have to, just because
that's not fair. It's not fair to anyone to like carry that burden on their own.
No.
And I do agree with you. I think they are carrying a lot of it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Another question for you: why is the way into the music industry? Why is the way in not more transparent?
Power. It comes down to power and money, right?
Where is the power?
Record labels want, I think, you think about the artists, it used to be like Spotify before it was overrun with record labels like controlling everything. It was artists kind of circumventing, at least my understanding of this, was circumventing some of these record labels, right? Or SoundCloud, for example, or YouTube, all of these things. It used to be these artists of any type who were saying, basically, fuck the system, and I'm gonna try to meet my audience where they are. And there's still some of that, but now the companies have come in, and we aren't at quite a place yet where they're regulated, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're a little bit in a neutral zone where now you've got the big companies coming and taking over. And that's not to say people are evil. Like, I don't want to give that impression, but it is, how do I make money, right?
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, human behavior is going to be dictated by our desires. Our desires 100%. And our motivations are going to tend towards money.
Yes.
Because that's what we need to survive. So when there's no safeguards in place from the government or the industry or whatever to prevent our worst impulses, they will happen. And that's why I think, correct me if you think differently, that there's so much abuse and of artists by record labels, because there's no one saying no, and they want to squeeze as much money as they can out of this artist because they can.
Well, and think about it. I mean, I said this before, but like for every one artist that gets big, there's 1,000 to 10,000 waiting in the wings. Mm-hmm. So in some respects, like a lot of this happens because if you say no to something, somebody will take your spot who says yes.
And you might never get a yes ever again.
Exactly. And that's changing because I think there's big artists. I think even like a Taylor Swift who's exposing a lot of like with her masters and the contracts she had to sign. I think she's Adele telling Spotify, people should be able to listen to my album all the way through without it being on shuffle. And Spotify changed it. So some of these artists, like I have great respect for them because they're still in positions where maybe they don't have a lot of power. They have more power than the average artist.
They took a risk because I think what gives their criticism bite is the fans.
Yes.
Like shining attention, being like, yeah, exactly. Like said, insert company here. What are you going to do about this? Mm-hmm. And so these artists hope that their fandom is going to be on their side and help them.
But it's a tricky situation because there are plenty of good, and this is where it gets difficult too, because there are plenty of good people in the recording or the music industry who aren't artists, who are really doing their best, and there is a conflict between, you know, what you think is right and what they think is right. Maybe neither of you is wrong, but there's going to be drawbacks to either kind, right? Like I think, and depending on, for example, this would be, like I said, my sister works in PR. As an artist, hearing about Olivia Rodrigo and doing her car wash thing, I was not a fan of that. To my sister, who works in the PR industry, she said, I read so many articles and was talking to so many people about how brilliant that was and how respected it was
Why?
in the PR, because it was like motivating, it was getting her name out there. It was motivating people to buy and her music and listen to it
So
in
so
ways.
what was the car wash thing again? It's like you come
If
get
I
your
remember
car
right,
washed and
yeah.
you get an album?
I don't think it was that. I'd have to look it up again, but I just know, or it was like, you got to listen to my new song or something like that. And like, so that's just it, is that there's this idea that like, well, the purity of art and music, well, that's all well and good, but at some point you have to make some sacrifices, and it's where your line is, and obviously like ethically where lines are. But like,
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's what also makes it tricky, is depending on who you're talking to and their background, what might look really bad for one person is actually like, no, that was really cool for another person.
Yeah.
Not in every scenario, but
Yeah, and I mean, with the example you're giving, it's like you talk about like the purity of art,
yeah,
and like that's a very interesting and controversial topic
yeah,
because you could argue that, well, what record labels and Spotify, like all the streaming things are doing with music, like
yes,
they're um corrupting the purity of art, but yet then again they're also making it more sustainable.
exactly. And
uh
they're making it more available to people too.
yeah, so that it's easier to, in the snap of a fingers, find an artist you
Mm-hmm.
might like and get connected to them. But
Yeah,
yet at the same time, that artist is not being properly
yes,
compensated, and it's
mm-hmm.
very difficult for them to make a living unless they blow up huge. And that's
Yes,
difficult to do unless you have some kind of agreement with a record label.
mm-hmm.
So, like, it's a system that doesn't work, but then again, there are benefits to it.
Yes, yeah. That's just it, is that it doesn't. I think the idea that everything is all bad or all good, and even like my whole statement about purity of art, I was kind of making fun of it because I don't think that's a thing. Like, I think based on everything's subjective, right? So if purity of the
Yeah.
art to some person might be only my ideas, only my thoughts, only my truth, I don't know how much that
Right.
connects with people.
Well,
Like,
again, this ties into what we were saying before about
mhm.
classical music and the elitism of people being like, it's
Yes,
only
yes.
pure in its original form.
Hmm.
If you modernize it in any way, if you change anything, if you make it more accessible and more interesting and more fun for the people of today to listen to it, well, it's no
Hmm.
longer classical music. You've corrupted the purity of it.
And I think, just to speak on that a little bit, that thankfully is changing in a lot of circles. There are like Minnesota Opera, LA Opera, Chicago Lyric. There's a lot of places that are really striving, and smaller opera companies that are really striving to change that and to make it more accessible for everybody to
How?
have
Like,
different.
how do
So,
they
for
do that?
example, I did a couple of operas 2 years ago. With Mill City Opera, which no longer exists because COVID, but we did Così fan tutte, right, which is a Mozart opera, and a quick. There's two sisters. They're engaged to two guys. This third guy is like, hey, test their loyalty by pretending to go off to war, coming back in disguise, and switching sisters, basically. And it ends with they both cheat, but like it's been so manipulative, right? And it ends with them finding out and everything's fine kind of thing. But Crystal Manich, who directed it, she was a woman, obviously. I said she, but she was a woman of color, right? And she directed it, and she had it that the whole outro of the whole final thing that was played had every woman on stage, myself included, in the chorus, leave their men and leave the stage and go basically, fuck you, that was wrong. And it was
Nice.
awesome. And it got
Nice.
like, it was so cool, right? Because it
Mm-hmm.
was like, yeah, that's probably not what Mozart intended, but that's what reads now, right?
Yeah.
Or like Don Giovanni, who's again, trigger warning, a rapist. He, reading that now is a very different, like the shows that
Yeah.
do that.
But I mean,
they're-
at least Don Giovanni, he goes to hell at the
He does.
Spoiler
He does.
alert.
Spoiler alert, he goes to hell. But like how people set that now, they set it in the Oval Office when Trump was president, which was quite excellent, actually, if I do say so myself. I don't remember
Wow.
what company did that, but it was controversial, but it was
I want to see that. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, here's my take. I like classical music.
Mm-hmm.
I studied the piano for many years. I learned how to
Mm-hmm.
play all that stuff. I also am Russian. I come from a culture that really
Yes.
heavily appreciates classical music.
Yes.
I don't know why. It just is. Maybe because
Great Russian history of classical music.
maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, so like I've always enjoyed classical music. I would go to operas every year with my family in Chicago, and while I adored it, there was also times where I was like, unless so in some of the operas they would be singing in whatever original language, and they would
Mm-hmm.
have the subtitles come up on the top
Mm-hmm.
of the
Super titles? Yeah.
yeah, and I would be like, thank God, because
Yes.
I don't speak Italian, like and like I
Yeah.
can't keep up. Um, but and in the ones that didn't, I would be like, oh,
It's boring.
like it's
I
boring.
hate that.
Yeah, and or like in some cases, the stage would be
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep with what the stage would have been like back in the day, but like that's hard for me to relate to. That's hard for me to
Yeah.
find engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were other ones where they put a little bit more of a modern spin on it, or the
Yeah.
stages were more elaborate, or like more like
Mm-hmm.
in your face, and it's just like more of a spectacle.
Yeah.
And that's what I would argue, like, well, that's what the audience of
Yeah.
today wants, because we want an escape from our day-to-day
Yes.
lives, and so we need something that's more like that. So
Yeah.
so
And
what?
that's not,
Yeah,
I
go
was gonna say,
ahead.
that's not to say that you can't learn things or pick up on themes or that things can't be impactful if they're done like originally, but there just has to be a balance. And I think this purist take, as we get farther and farther away from when these pieces were written, like their themes and their messages are still powerful. It's just we have to contextualize them so it makes sense to people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Don Giovanni, for example, I went to see it. I had no idea what it was. My mother was
Oh
just
man,
like, "Let's go," and
it's a heck of an opera.
it's like when it opens with him like committing sexual assault, I was like,
Yeah.
why is this happening on stage? Why
Yeah.
am I supposed to be celebrating this? This is entertainment. Like, I was outraged. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I turned to my mother, I was like, what the fuck did you bring me to? I'm so mad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, I was like, at the very end, at least he goes to hell.
And it's
And I
men
was
in
like,
power unchecked, right? Like, which
yeah.
theme today?
Yeah, but it's just like for the majority of the opera, he was like, it was like, ha ha, he's funny being this
Mm-hmm.
guy who, you know, like is like following his like what's in his pants instead of being like a
Yeah.
decent dude. And I'm like, I'm not as entertained by it. I'm just pissed off, and
Yes.
I wasn't finished being pissed off until he went to hell at the end. And I was like, okay. And by that I mean literally the ground opened up, flames came
Yes, and
up,
he's
and
dragged down to
yeah,
hell. Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, all right, fine. I guess that this opera is morally in the right direction.
Don Giovanni. It's great. It's a great it's a great time. They just
Yeah.
like drag him down to hill. The statues come. It's great.
I wish it had been longer. I wish there had been more pain of him going to hell. It's
Some
just
people
like,
have been doing it where there's more. Yeah, it's more intense.
yeah. But so like when I hear of like modern takes on it's just the opera singing is amazing. It will always be amazing. But
Yes.
when you put
And
it
the
in
music.
yes, but when you put it in a context that I can understand and be
Mm-hmm.
appropriately like outraged or find entertaining based on current day life, it's so much more entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But
100%.
yet, you know, it's corrupting the purity of the art. So
Yeah.
and
Which honestly, a lot of those people, it sounds bad, are dying off. Like, they just are. Like, a lot of the people who were very strict about, no, we have to keep it. There's still some, but I think thankfully that part of the industry is moving more to a place where it's not like that anymore. I mean, there's still some pushback, but because part of it is like, if you're only attracting people of a certain age and above.
then your industry is dying out.
Yes, exactly.
Like if you can't get, is that something you worry about? Like getting young people into opera or younger?
You know, yes and no. I think that there's enough people that are interested and who are of a younger age, and especially when you do outreach stuff and like showing and getting rid of some of this elitism. I think if it were the way things were even 20 years ago, I'd be more concerned. But I think there has to be change. And even the new operas that are being composed, like Minnesota Opera premieres a new opera every year. because they're trying to like, the composers who are
Mm.
composing things and new artists and all these things. They're
How do
trying to
how do you become an opera composer? Like,
more
I'm just
school
gonna write me
generally.
an opera.
Composition, I had several composition major friends.
Oh,
And you
really?
don't have to, some were like not into opera at all. I had one guy who was doing, I don't remember, he had like a jazz background and was doing a bunch of world, it was really cool. But yeah,
Fun.
there's like doctorates and masters in composition. Again, it's a lot of learning techniques and then how to break them.
That's really cool, but also probably is there a lack of diversity there as well, maybe? Mostly because I
Yes.
just think there's such a high financial barrier to entry
Yes.
to continue to study until you get like a doctorate.
They're changing that, I would say, where it's becoming again more and more reflective of the population in general. Um, and but like again, yeah, I think the thing with doctorates, it's so competitive, but they're fully paid for, right? Like
Oh,
you
are they?
get, yeah, yeah. You generally don't have to pay for a doctorate. If you did, it would be generally because you probably weren't good enough to get in, but you had the money. But that just doesn't happen very much.
So pay to
Yeah,
play, pay
yeah,
your way in.
exactly. Yeah. Whereas it may be they're paid or it could be scholarship. It could be, that's why you have doctoral TAs, is that they're getting paid to teach and then that's part of their package that they get, their financial
Mm,
package.
gotcha.
Um, so at a certain level, again, it's super competitive and that's part of the problem. I would say the barrier to entry is like the initial, the lessons and the getting good and getting experience in things and then going to school and because not everybody can get a scholarship
Yeah,
and so yeah.
and you have to have parents who are willing and have the idea. Oh, let's
Yes.
put our child into music lessons of some sort.
Which I would say I would encourage everybody to put a kid in music lessons, regardless of whether that kid is going to go do music, because it just expands your worldview. It expands your artistic sensibilities. It expands how you look at people and things and the world. All of those things. That's my little, yeah.
um. Okay, what do you wish people would know or appreciate about music, or specifically maybe
Mm,
about what you do that people often don't?
um, that's a good question. I think what I sometimes struggle with, and this is again like an online thing, and I think I struggle with people who make comments like, you're always entitled to your opinion. But if you're saying something with your full chest behind it and you have never had a music lesson or studied music a day in your life and you're promoting a narrative, I, I get frustrated with that. And I think part of that again comes back to the point that yes, everybody has a voice and everybody should be able to use that voice, whether we're talking musically or non. But you also wouldn't go up to a nuclear physicist, most people wouldn't at least, and say, no, you're wrong, and spout this stuff, right? And so I think it's the respect value. Like when I see BTS, I'm like, they are professionals, grown men at the top of their careers with their pick and like they could have anybody come give them feedback. They could choose anybody in the industry. Any teacher would, of course, want
And
to go,
anyone would
right?
jump at the chance.
Yes. And so for people online to come in and be like, I know best, I know better. Not only is it insulting to them, which is bad enough and like infantilizing, but it's kind of insulting to me because it's like, well, why the fuck did I go to 6 years of music school and spend like the last 22 years of my life since I was 4 years old spending all this time when Joe Schmo from Kansas can come over and be like, no, I know best because I watched a YouTube video once. So I think there's like, and again, that comes back to criticism. I'm not going to take criticism from those people to heart because they don't know anything. They don't. And like, they may have some valid points. And so, still listen. But ultimately, it's like, you don't know. And so I think that's my biggest issue. And with how, and I don't want it to be elitist either because it's not that you have to go study music, but it's just your willingness to listen and listen to people who know and trust that people who are in at least like BTS and people who are at the top of their game know what they're doing and trust that.
And
I
don't
think
need
that's
your
my biggest
help, and
thing.
no one is locked in the
No,
basement.
no, no, exactly. And so that, and then just how all music is connected. Like opera, I think just it has this appearance of being stuffy and elitist, and that's a problem, because especially the last century that's how it went. But it wasn't always. Like, yes, the courts were the ones promoting because they had the money, and you follow the money.
The royal courts.
The royal courts, yes, thank you.
Sorry, not the legal courts.
No, royal courts. And so you'd have, and the church and all of these things. But there were still plenty of operas where you'd have penny operas, and they'd come in, they'd have all these people, random people come in, like the random civilians, and they'd pay a penny, and they'd bring like tomatoes, and they'd throw them at people, and like they sold popcorn, and like it wasn't just for the elite. And then it kind of started skewing that way, and just perception. And I think movies, even, you've got like Nazis listening to opera, and it's like, I mean, yes, but they weren't the only ones listening to opera at the time.
Is the evil rich person's
exactly
hobby.
When it's yes, and that there is, and I understand why that is a perception. I 100% get it. It just can be frustrating. So I would say those two things, but especially the one where people just start talking about things like they know what they're talking about.
Like what?
It's different if you're raising questions.
Do you have any examples?
Literally anytime somebody is like, BTS is being mistreated.
Nope.
No. First of all, I trust that they have enough agency to speak up if they are being mistreated. We talked about some of these contracts and how divisive they can be, and how they can be, like, I don't want to, say that there isn't manipulation happening in the industry, because there is, right? And like Britney Spears is a prime example of that. Taylor Swift in the contract. But all of those people also spoke out about the issues they were having, right? And Taylor Swift has been very obvious with her disdain for Scooter Braun. And so I trust that the artists, like especially at BTS's level, if they were a small indie label, I might have more issues. But they're not. They're the biggest artists in the world, and we've seen them speaking their minds in other places, and we've seen them speak up for themselves, and they're at the top of their game, and they're professionals, and they're not teenagers. That's the other thing, is a lot of these teenagers get roped into contracts and they don't know any better. These are grown men in their 20s, approaching 30. All of that is like, they're not. I just, and just because somebody doesn't like criticism doesn't mean that BTS is being hurt by criticism. If like somebody they trust, like a P-Dog, like anybody, like their choreographer, if they're giving them feedback, that's not wrong. That's not mean. It's not evil. They have a good relationship. In fact, the fact that they feel comfortable giving feedback shows me that they have a good relationship, because if they didn't, they wouldn't give it on camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and the other part of it is that if you as a fan don't like what they're releasing or what kind of art they're making, that does not give you a license to say, oh, they're being abused or mistreated because they're not releasing the art that I want them to make. They're not releasing their mixtape. Oh, they're being silenced, or
exactly.
Like,
art takes time. First of all,
sorry, art is not a straight line. It's not steps 1, 2, 3.
And it's
like step 1, step 2, step ABC, then step turkey, and then step chicken fries.
Apples. Yes.
And then maybe we'll come back and it'll be step 3, and you'll be like, oh, that was a very weird journey. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and the idea that it's, I think the other thing too is it's okay if you don't vibe with a song. You don't have to find a reason that the artist made a bad song. You can just say, I didn't love that song. That's okay. You don't have to like everything. The problem comes when you try to come up with excuses for why you don't like it, that it's not just your personal taste, that it's for some reason the artist is
wrong.
God, objectivity in art, that's a whole thing. When I become a professor, I'm going to teach a whole class on how there is no objective good or bad in art. You cannot have it. Everyone has a bias, but that's a discussion for...
In your opinion, what is the point of art?
Oh...
Because I've said what I think the definition and purpose of art is before. I'll give you mine after you give me yours.
I would say expression and human connection in a way that transcends a lot of barriers.
Listen, bitch.
That we
Stop
erect.
taking words out of my mouth.
Did I? Yes. What
Okay,
was yours?
that it's a form of expression of the human spirit, and it's a
Yeah.
way it's a vehicle for one person to convey an experience to another.
We're so in sync. Yes. And the other thing too with art, not to get another pet peeve. I mean, these aren't really pet peeves as much as they're serious problems I have with social media, but just because someone's exploring a dark theme in art doesn't mean that they're doing that thing, right? Like art is a good vehicle, like you said, to explore some of these darker sides because you can't just pretend that nothing exists except for good and fluffy hearts in the world. Like, so when you have somebody dealing with difficult things, I saw this when Jungi was collaborating on Juice WRLD's thing, where people were like, he's talking about these horrible things. It's like, it's okay if you don't vibe with that, if you don't like that. I 100% respect that. But you can't be like, he's promoting these things when that's not what art is doing. What art is doing is it's just it's a place, it's a safe place to discuss and explore some of these themes, not in real life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in a place where because
it's
there are
what
people who have these thoughts.
yeah, it's what Billie Eilish says about her music.
Yes. Yes. And it's not saying like when I go play a prostitute who's murdered, I'm not saying that's not what I do in my free time. Like but there's a lot there's a reason she exists as a character is because to discuss some of this stuff and to and when somebody plays a murderer doesn't mean they're murdering people. If somebody's talking about their dark stuff, again, like you don't have to listen to it. Nobody's unless somebody is forcing you to, in which case we've got a whole other issue. You don't have to. I think that's the problem I have too is like if art doesn't speak to you, then don't listen to it.
Turn it off.
Yeah. You have that
Next.
power. Nobody's making you listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in total agreement on that point as well.
Yeah. Are there any comments I should hear? I'm trying not to look at them.
Well, there was a conversation that happened about streaming and if there's a difference, but that's probably a question for another day. I think you guys
Totally.
Answered that. And then there was a lot of agreement with us about how mantis and solos are stupid and common sense is really nice to hear. And then someone said, I think it relates to the customer knows better kind of thing, but customers are often wrong. They complain about something just because they had a bad day or experience.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Something I actually did want to ask you about, because we talked about this once a long time ago and then never again, is do you have any observations about the differences between like trends in the music industry between the Western music industry and the Eastern? And I say this in like specific to singing technique, because we talked about at one point that there's a specific singing technique that female K-pop groups generally
read my mind.
like to sing with, and that's not always the way it happens in the West. That like if you think of like a group like Twice compared to Ariana Grande, there's a clear distinct difference in style.
Or an Adele. So I would say, and then there's no, just let me preface this with, there's no judgment whatsoever based on anything. This is just a style and a noticeable style thing. And this isn't a reflection on technique either. Again, like I said, I would have to have a relationship with someone to give them, feedback on technique. All of that said, from what I've heard from most of the girl groups I've listened to, which I'm not really a fan of, but I think they do some great stuff, there's a very bright, forward sound. It's a very, there's soft palate and in the back. So you've got two palates in your mouth. Your hard palate, which is behind your teeth. It's where you make like your T's and D sounds. Your soft palate is farther back. It's right in front of your uvula that hangs down. So in opera, for example, here, I'll just show you. So if I have a lowered soft palate, right? Versus like a completely raised one, which is not necessarily the way we go, which would be, right? Completely different sound. So from what I gather, and part of this, again, could be just the type of people that are in groups, and there's not to say that all of them are like this, but there is a brighter sound. It's more forward placement, right? compare that to a lot of like a Billie Eilish or an Adele, even an Ariana Grande to an extent, a Taylor Swift. First of all, we have a lot of lower voices in the Western music industry. Ariana notwithstanding, but even her stuff, besides her stuff that she goes way high on, it's still lower, right? And it's lower and it's more, there's more of a belt sound to it, right? Like, hello, it's me. I was wondering. It's that lower sound, but it's also very chesty. It's got a little bit of a darker sound. So that would be the biggest. Men,
Do you think that's like biology or like genetics?
honestly, I don't know. I would have to work. I don't think so. It could be. Actually, one of my really good friends in my master's program was a doctorate student, and she was from Korea, and I loved her. Young and she was amazing, but she had a brighter voice than I did. But that's like my one, like. But we were the same voice type, so we were double cast in everything. And she had a naturally lighter, brighter voice than I did. Again, I can't say that that would be a very sweeping generalization.
Yeah,
So
fair.
could be culture, it could be biology. I think it's more cultural. I think it has more to do with what sound people like in
Yeah,
one area versus another.
definitely.
I think that's more because I can sing super brightly. Or darkly, either one. Chiaroscuro, it's called chiaroscuro, sorry. So bright and dark, right? So I can sing in those, but like I kind of end up doing a mix of the two. But in some areas, I think that brighter sound might be more preferred, and in other areas, that darker sound might be more preferred, and it just depends.
Gotcha. So outside of, sorry, I interrupted you. We're gonna talk
No,
about
you're okay.
men.
Oh, men, it's a little harder because there's such a wild difference. I will say the trend in general these days, I mean, in pop music across the board, is tenors. And even baritones who just sing high. There's very few bass baritones in pop music.
Can you give us the levels again?
Yeah. So for women, it's soprano. This is classical. Soprano, mezzo, contralto. If we're talking pop music, it's going to be soprano, alto mostly. For men, it's countertenor, who are the rare unicorns.
Can you compare that like so it's soprano, alto, and then tenor?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, countertenor in opera, which is when you have somebody who's singing, like they sing the female roles, right? Like, or it used to be castrati in opera, where they would, a long time ago, they'd cut certain things, so the men never went through puberty, and so their voices literally never dropped. That is no longer the case.
Because they would prefer to have men sing opera than let women have a chance.
Yes, that, and again, culturally, high voice was seen as good. And actually, what's hilarious is that the castrati got a ton of chicks. It was really funny. So, it was just sexy back then. My point, but in pop music, soprano, alto, tenor.
Insert naughty joke here. Anyway.
Yeah. Tenor, baritone, bass, right?
Wait.
And so.
Sorry, say that again.
Soprano, alto, tenor, baritone, bass.
Okay.
They're kind of the same. Bass is lower. It's more of an opera term. Baritone is probably what I would go with. So Tay is a baritone, and yet a lot of the stuff he sings is high, because across the industry, East and West, I would say that high male sound is what a lot of people like and enjoy listening to.
Is it because it's easy to sing along for both men and
Probably.
women?
Could be part of it. It's hard to, because there's a whole music history
I
thing.
say that because I literally found a YouTube channel that I linked to you where the guy sings covers really low. Was he a tenor? Bass tenor?
Again, he would be one where I'd have to like know him.
Yeah. Because like I told you, like he's singing covers of songs I know, and he's changed the key and brought it down so he can sing it lower.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. Like my ear literally doesn't recognize it. I want it to be higher, and I can't sing along as well. So
yeah. And part of that is just us humans, we like consistency. And that also shows your ear for music too, just to give you a compliment, is that I don't think that would bother everybody, but once you get established in a key center and stuff, that just shows that your musical ear is like, that's what it is, right? So that you can tell. But I think that you could probably, like a musicologist could trace, I mean, even the fact, like I just said, castrati were super popular. That's that high, super high male voice sound. And bass baritones were often seen, they were played the villains or the comic relief characters in opera. And if we're looking at Western music as like stemming, which a lot of pop music, musical theater, everything, rock, jazz, stems technically from classical music, right? Because that was
Mm-hmm.
really the first genre in Western music.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have this idea of that bass baritones are evil or the comic relief, what's fascinating about that is that mezzo sopranos were also either the evil ones or the ugly old women or the hags or the jilted lovers or the comic relief. And so somehow we've kept a little bit of like the leading man tenor sound in pop music, and yet we've switched now. And it could be just because people got tired of like super high sopranos. It could be, I also think recording wise, they talk about that sopranos, when recording equipment was first being developed, it was really hard to record sopranos because it was too
Too
much.
high?
Yeah, it was too high. So
Oh.
honestly, that's probably the root of a lot of this, is that they were recording high voiced men and low voiced women when recording first developed. And now we don't need that, but it's still a thing.
But the general public has a
Yeah.
preference for what we like to hear. And I mean, yeah, I guess I'm included in that because I also have a preference for what I like to hear. And I didn't know
Yep.
until I heard the opposite. And I was like,
Yep.
I don't like this. Go back
Yep.
up. Go back up.
Yep. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. So then between Eastern and Western industry, do you see any trends or preferences for like musical instruments?
Oh, um, that's a very vast question.
Sorry.
Because no, I just think if we're talking pop music,
Sure. Let's focus on pop music.
because I was like, if you come any other genre, you're just gonna get a mess. Pop music, it's all. I think we're circling back to electronic sounds, synthesizers. Music comes in cycles, right? And so you had
Does
the
it?
high synths, yeah, had the high synths of the 80s where it was all super synthesized and like really 80s sound, you recognize it.
I love that
And then we
sound.
went away from that in the 90s and the 2000s. I think we're actually kind of going back in some ways to that high synth sound. Maybe not as egregious, but like where everything, I think part of it has to do with producing. A MIDI keyboard is something, so there's digital and analog, right? Like watches. Analog is like, it's literally transferring the sound waves into the computer or into the recording. And so live instruments, that would be analog, singing. MIDI or digital I'm typing basically, or pressing keys, and it's creating like code, which is then turning into, not code, but it's
So
like
the
dots.
sound is pre-recorded.
Yes, but not only that, it's like, it's not the sound, like it's creating sound based off of what the computer is reading, right? Which is, it's gotten to a point where it can be hard to tell if it's a live instrument or a MIDI, but it used to be very obvious, right? It was that like tinny sound that you could really tell.
Yeah,
And there's still times
because you could only like when cell phones were first becoming popular, MIDI was the only kind of ringtone you could have.
Yes,
I
exactly.
had MIDI ringtones for every pop song, and I would cycle
Lord.
through them because I was like, I'm so special.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, so all of that with instrumentation, then I think synthesizers are really big right now. I think, we've moved away from live orchestra, even with film composing. There's just.
Really? Even
They play it, but like Hans Zimmer, for example, writes on a keyboard. He doesn't write.
yeah,
with
I've
so,
seen his
yeah.
docus. Yeah.
Yeah, the docu-series. So that is why so much of his music is brass heavy, because that's the best sound on a synthesizer, and short strings, because long strings are the ones where you really tell, oh, that's not a real thing, right? So that there's definitely still, but like TV shows or even orchestras in the background of different songs, like a Film Out, for example. I think I looked at the credits and that was real instrumentation, which makes sense because it was very legato, meaning smooth. But a lot of times, they might not actually have. First of all, they're not going to have an orchestra. They're going to have one violinist come in and double everything, just because you can. That's how recording works. You don't need to have a full orchestra. You don't need to have several people playing because you can just repeat it a bunch. But I think they also, a lot of times these days, people are getting away with not hiring like actual musicians to come in and do it, because why not just have the keyboardist play it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
that's tough then for people who actually play those instruments and
Yeah.
want to make a living. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, I can also understand from a creative process, if you're the producer and you want to keep
Yes.
going in the song,
Yep.
if you could really quickly just do it yourself.
Yes. And then there's this pushback, right? Because there's plenty of artists who are like, no, I want to have that real sound, but you have to have the money for that, right? So they have to be at a certain level. Where I actually knew one of the girls I went to school with, who's a violinist. She played on Taylor Swift's new album, the Red re-release. She played on one of the songs. Like Taylor hired her to play, or like Taylor's label hired her. Yeah, it's pretty
Wow.
cool.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, again, people you know, connections.
Yeah.
Um, so there is still a push. It's just I think that would be the trend, is that it's you're not completely reliant on instruments anymore. It's a whole, like, you have options, I guess, would be my observation.
Gotcha.
And rarely does like BTS, they use live instruments, but I don't hear a lot of like, you know, it's a lot of digital, which is gorgeous. I love it, but it's a
Yeah.
lot of synth. It's a lot of electric guitar that could even be being played MIDI. You know,
Yeah,
nothing
yeah,
wrong
for
with.
BTS, it sounds like they use the live bands when they perform
Yes.
more.
Yep.
And it
Which
may,
nothing wrong with any of that.
and maybe is that why? Because they're tired of listening to their digital sounds,
Could
and
totally be.
they're like, remix time, live band.
Could totally be. I've been there. It also could just be that they want to have other people on stage, or have the ability to have like there's nothing like live music. Like, you know, if things go wrong, you got to adjust on the fly. It's one of the best things about live performance, is that it's anything could go wrong at any time, and that's part of what makes you a good performer, is how you roll with the punches, and how you deal with it. And it's part of what makes live music so exciting.
Have you had anything bad ever happen to you?
Oh, hell yes.
Like what?
I this was in like middle or high school. I got locked outside once.
What?
And I went and got water, and then like the doors didn't open. So I had to run around. It's negative 20 degrees outside. I'm wearing this 20s dress. I had to run around the entire school back inside, and like barely made my entrance, but was like super whacked about it, obviously.
Oh my God.
But the other one, I was doing this show where like there were a couple, like we were all witches or something. It was like a off-brand Snow White kind of thing. And the whole scene revolved around the spell book. And somebody moved the spell book and it wasn't there. So I had to just on the fly completely change the scene. So like somebody comes on stage holding us a spell book. I was like, oh look, let's look to see if we got it right. Like so stuff like that. Or somebody gets sick and you've got somebody come in that you really haven't worked with. Or the oboist sneezes or something and you're trying really hard not to laugh. Like there's stuff like that. Or somebody forgets a line. It's really, you know, it's you practice enough that hopefully that doesn't happen. But sometimes, especially if you've done a show like 12 times, your brain checks out and then you're like, what was I doing again? Did I already say this line? Like that's the worst part, is where you're like, have we done this today? Like,
That's like that time, I think it was in Japan. It was in the third docu-series, the Break the Silence, where they were coming off the stage and they're making fun of Namjoon because he forgot his line in Idol, and he was like, can't call me artist. Can't call me Idol.
Yes, exactly. But that's what makes live performance fun, is you just adapt to it and you roll with it and you're like, whoops, that sucked. Like, you know, it happens. Or one of my favorites, my uncle on one side, he used to be a voiceover artist, but he knew a lot of people in the industry. We're not close, so he is not my connection, but I do technically have an uncle, I suppose, that did artistry work. But he told me a story once about on stage, like this whole cast, like somebody forgot their line and nobody could remember who said the line either. And so the stage manager is off stage whispering, like shout whispering the line. And the lead guy in character didn't miss a beat. He's like, we know what the line is, old chap. We just don't know which one of us says it. And like in front of the entire audience. And it was hilarious. The whole audience cracked up because it was like, yeah, that's funny. And nobody could remember who said the line.
Oh,
so yeah,
that's really cute. I like that.
And you gotta keep in character and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Or somebody the worst part is when somebody moves something and you're like, well, I now have to do this scene without that. Let's hope that works.
Yeah,
Or you're, oh, I forgot my shoes once. Dude.
what?
My roommate had to run my shoes to me because I totally forgot my stage shoes. So I showed
Oh,
up halfway through the performance, did it without shoes, and then did the other half with
nice,
shoes. Yeah.
nice.
Hmm.
But like I totally relate. That stuff is fun. I remember when I was in school and I was in plays and musicals,
Yeah.
and like there's that kind of adrenaline and
Hmm.
camaraderie in that
Hmm.
moment that you don't really get in
Hmm.
other settings. And I think that is something that we see in the all the docu
Yes.
series that BTS have done. Like they have so much camaraderie with their staff that work
Yes.
with them behind stage. Like when they literally run off stage and just start stripping and like and their staff are like, come here, come here, come here, let me fix you up. Okay, you
Yeah.
ready? Like,
I also, with performances like that, like, I do this with some of the bands I'm a part of, where, like, if you do songs enough times, you just start throwing in inside jokes. Like, I'll start playing do 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 do, which is the theme from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'll just
uh,
throw it in somewhere. Or Jurassic Park, I've thrown in Summer of the Rainbow and just see, and like it's cracking up the pianist, but like nobody in the audience, maybe one person went, was
oh,
that
you mean
someone that?
like when you play during your church stuff?
Yeah, or like just if different bands. I mean, there's plenty of artists, like there's this famous the lick thing where like there's a specific lick that every bass player knows how to play. But like
What's a
there's
lick?
people it's like a short musical phrase that like works for a lot of different things.
Ah,
Um I'm not gonna play it. The point is that like so you have especially these bands who go on tour and do the same thing over and over again. They'll start adding in funny things to make the other ones laugh, or like how many times can I fit the lick in without anybody noticing in the audience? And so they get to like 40 times, and so stuff like it's a community. It's like we talked about. It's not only expression, but it's how you communicate with others and how you relate to others and how you are with people and make each other laugh and cry and all these different things.
yeah, and you share intense emotion together.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I like when BTS say they miss performing, to me
Yes.
it's like they miss Army
Yes.
100%, no doubt. They miss being on stage and communing with their fandom,
Yeah.
but they also miss that behind the stage stuff, that like
Yes.
this massive production that takes so many people and so much practice and so much time to put together,
Mm-hmm.
like that sense of like we're in our own world. Nothing
Yeah.
exists outside of
Yeah.
this concert.
The reward for that.
Yeah.
And there really is nothing like performance. Like there's just, and I think just even on a small scale, what I've been through for the last 2 years, just not being able to really, I mean, it gave, obviously, it's just an inkling of what BTS has, but it's like, it's painful. And in a lot of ways, I had to like shut myself off and numb myself and like wasn't practicing, wasn't doing a lot of music because it hurt too much. Because it was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get this back. And my whole life was going in one direction in this trajectory, and it was immediately stopped, and now there's nothing. And so I get it. And so that's why the other thing too is when people are like or blaming them or the company or something for not producing music or for not producing things, or like, well, this isn't raw and deep enough. It's like, well, but they were at a point where maybe they couldn't do that for their own sake. Like they needed to create this other type of music. They needed to do these things. They weren't feeling artistically inspired. Like to give them the benefit of the doubt that it's not some overarching evil narrative, that it's like,
That
no, we're
Hive is not a
human.
Disney villain.
No, we're human. And if my experience of like I just broke down and cried one day, like, and I couldn't stop crying. I didn't know why. And I was like, it's because all of this grief and stress and sadness just built up until it just had to overflow. And then was able to start moving forward. But even then, we don't know how much we can move forward. I can't
Mm-hmm.
really, like, I'm supposed to go to the summer program, but I'm trying not to get really excited about it because what if I can't go? What if it gets put online? And great, but it's not the same thing, all
Yeah.
those things. So I think just compassion and understanding, especially that artists, it's a job, but it's also so much intertwined with like your soul and who you are as a person. And so to make demands of some in some ways, or be like, well, this is too happy, it's like, fuck you, maybe I needed something happy. Maybe that was the only thing I could do because my dark stuff was way too dark, and if I went there, it would have been too much.
I couldn't have
Like,
come back.
yeah, it's possible. And I don't want to put words in their mouths, but that's kind of what some of the stuff they've shown us is like, get that. And there's always something else going on. So not to just assume that it's one thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I understand. I think it's super tough for you, for them, for everyone who is in an industry that's on hold because of this fucking pandemic. And I think we're all suffering under this stupid uncertainty. It's like, new year, new what? Where are we going with this fucking COVID? You know?
Yeah.
And the
well,
words
how do
of,
I? Yeah.
Go
what were you
ahead.
gonna say? I was gonna, how do I teach right now? You know, I'm teaching in person and online, but like my students they don't know what they're working toward. Are they working toward a show that's gonna happen, or is it gonna not happen? You know, like, and those are just little things, but like they build, especially for kids, like they build on your psyche, and that's what happened. Is it just was one loss after another. It felt like that, and I think for all of us, not just in the arts, but I think just in the arts having, you know, you don't have an outlet then at all. We're in the business of people, right? That's what somebody said to me, is like, the arts are with people. We're in the business of bringing people together. And when you can't do that, it's awful.
Yeah, I totally get it. I hope that things can improve for all of us, and I hope that your program ends up being in person.
Me too.
Last question before we wrap it up.
Yes.
Do you have any predictions on what you think the next album or the next chapter that BTS are talking about is going to be?
There's so many ways it could go. I could see them being like super involved like they were with B. I could see them bringing in like different genres. That would be pretty cool. Or different writers and producers who are maybe with like a different sound. That could be really cool. Mm-hmm. I could see them expanding. I mean, maybe diving into some of their emotions the last 2 years, but maybe not. And I think that's where I want to be like careful with some people like, oh, this is going to be their COVID album. And it's like, well, but COVID isn't over.
Yeah.
And some of these things, I just trust that they're gonna share that if they want to, and never share it if they don't want to, and that's okay, and that I'm not entitled to that as a fan. That's not to say we can't make predictions, but like, I don't know. There's just, I think sometimes I see online, because it's Twitter, where it's like, it's gotta be this, and I'm gonna be disappointed if it's not. It's like, well, then why are you a fan? You're not. You go make it. You go make it.
You go figure out how fucking hard it is to make any kind of art. How to create something out of nothing. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know, but I would think that they keep saying this new chapter thing, and so there's going to be something new, whether that's musically or the way they're involved or the way they're writing or artistically or even just the way they present things or the subject matter. I think there's going to be something new, but still BTS because it's still them.
I just hope it brings catharsis to them, to me, to all of us. That's all I can hope for.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So in the words of a very wise man named Kim Namjoon, fuck COVID.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. That's all I can say. Thank you for all of your time today, Maddie.
Oh, this was so fun.
I really appreciate you letting me talk or pick your brain and ask you questions so you can just, give me all the knowledge that I don't know.
Thanks for asking such good questions too. They were really good, like making me think about it, and yeah.
I mean, I just think if you're not in the music world in some way, a lot of this stuff is like a black box, and it's really it's really hard to find out. So it's nice to be able to get your perspective as someone who's lived and breathed this for so long.
Yeah, and it's good for me too to articulate it, because like I shared with you, sometimes I'm so immersed in this world that like I forget that it's not the only thing there is, and it can be kind of like damaging to you actually if you're only in that world, because you kind of forget perspective. Mm-hmm. And so for me to be able to talk about these things and hear your reaction and be like, oh, that is cool, isn't it? Like, or
it's very cool.
Like, oh, that was yay, that kind of thing. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think our chat enjoyed it too. Thank you
Good.
guys for joining us. I
It was the
really
best. Thank
appreciate
you.
you being a really good audience, and all your questions were great.
Yeah.
And I hope you learned something too. So
Yeah.
on that note, I will see.
Oh,
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
I have a special announcement. Um, I'm just gonna go right out and say this. Tomorrow I am interviewing my time producer Sleep
Woo!
on Twitter Space. So I am really excited for this. I have so many questions to ask him. I'm gonna pick his brain the way I picked Maddie's, and it's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow, Saturday, at so January 15th at
Yes.
8
Yes.
p.m. Eastern. That will be 10 a.m. KST time. That will be 5 p.m. Pacific time. Uh,
We're very, very proud. Are we
yeah.
not, chat? This is very exciting.
Yeah. So it won't be on this YouTube. It'll be on Twitter. It'll be in the Twitter space. So I will tweet it. I'm sure Sleep will tweet it. I'll tweet it.
I'll tweet it.
Thank you. and I think you have to follow him in order to see the Twitter space pop up.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think. I'm not quite sure how it works. The reason we're doing it on Twitter Space is because he has a partnership with Twitter to like help them expand that part of their thing. And don't worry if you can't listen in live. It will be recorded and it'll be on Twitter for playback for 30 days. And I think it'll be transcribed as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that is happening and I'm very excited about it. I'm very nervous, but mostly excited.
It's pretty awesome.
So yeah, thank you. I hope you guys can tune in. I hope you can have some fun. And Maddie? What's your tweeter? Do you want to read it out? It's right underneath
Yeah.
your.
It's over there. So my personal one is Stan account HRM. It's my initials backwards, in case I know it's not that secretive. But if you guys have any specific or any even non-specific questions, please feel free. I love talking about this stuff. So yeah, there's no bad questions at all. So yeah, whatever works. And then I'm also one of the managers of the Musician Army's '07 account. It's just an account run by and for any different level of musician.
It's a community of Army musicians.
Exactly. And we do have a Discord, but we do a lot on Twitter, and so like we do, different recommendations. We'll answer questions and we'll give commentary on things. So
and you guys have done BTS covers.
We have, and we've got those linked in our profile and in our card too. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you guys are so nice. Okay.
So
all right. So on that note, I'll be tweeting about my interview with Sleep tomorrow shortly after this live. So please go check it out. Please retweet it. I would love for everyone to have a chance to hear it because I want to share Sleep's knowledge with the world. Yes. I wanted to reach every corner of this fandom. I want everyone to know what he knows and is willing to tell us.
Yes, true.
But yeah. So on that note, have a good night, guys. And
bye, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, we will see you next time. Or I will, whatever.
You'll never see me again.
Thank you for being here today. All right, bye. Okay, we're good. Yeah, and the chat box should still be there. It's a little fucked up, but whatever. Yeah, you're muted. Oops, I forgot to mute myself. Hi guys, bye.